Chapter 1774. It had long been a common occurrence. The endless cycle of every day was a chase race that would not change at all. Being chased by time, one would habitually run along with time. As long as one was still alive, there was no way to stop. Day after day, it was a monotonous cycle. Zhou Zibai felt that she had completely gotten used to this cycle of more than 20 years. Everything happened step by step, and she grew up step by step. It was as if it had become a convention that someone would come to find trouble with her. When she was chasing time, she also had to deal with the competitors who were also running desperately on the track. If she wanted to get out of the vortex, she had to destroy it or choose to stay away. She felt that this cycle would continue until more than 10 years later, when someone took over the small participation qualification from her and continued. Then 3 meteorites suddenly came out of nowhere and knocked her out of the battle of the vortex into the deep sea. It was completely out of the past track and even made it impossible for her to predict the future. Everything was out of control. However, it seemed to be not bad. Her life had already been fixed, and there was a slight change in her life to experience some other things. She felt that this was something that countless people wanted to experience once, no matter where they were. Now, she bumped into this opportunity, and she should firmly grasp it. For this reason, it should be quite good to temporarily put aside the things behind her. It would be good if Mr. Hui did not suddenly pull her and fly into the sky, high and far away in the blue sky, side by side with the white clouds. Unfortunately, she was not sitting in a metal shell that weighed hundreds of tons, but was floating here with the wind. The wind at high altitude blew her long hair into a mess, but she did not have time to deal with it. She was afraid that if she let go of her hand, she would scream out loud. If it's possible, I hope that the next time you fly, you can let me know a little so that I can be mentally prepared. Zhou Zibai fiercely grabbed Yin Nuoxing's shoulder, and her pretty face was pale. She looked down at the ground and confirmed that her feet were really in the air. She trembled and closed her eyes while trembling. This height is not even as high as that tower. What are you afraid of? Hui sighed and waved his hand. Don't worry, but I'm just an ordinary person. Zhou Zibai could not help but smile bitterly. The difference between 1,000 meters and 10,000 meters is nothing more than which one takes longer to shout. The effect of landing is the same for me. Don't worry, don't worry. I won't let you land on the ground. We gave a thumbs up and grinned. He seemed to be a little excited now. Besides, even if there's a pa-G sound after the ah, we can still pull you back. Zhou Zibai. Although it sounded amazing, she didn't want to experience it at all. Yin Nuoxing patted her back and said, Don't worry. Since he said that, he won't have any scruples. You'll get used to it. I can't get used to it. 1,000 meters high in the sky, a group of 4 figures were half hidden in the clouds. They looked down at the ground and the entire Jiang city from the sky. They had a slightly different feeling. For example, on the day they landed, they did not find that there were large and small dark auras hidden in Jiang city. The negative auras they just saw on the brownish-red land were not unique. There were dozens of places in the entire Jiang city, and the scale was not the same. The negative auras in the place they first saw were relatively small. These auras are entrenched in the city, and no one knows about them. Over time, they will spread. At first, they will affect the people living around them, making people irritable and magnifying the negative emotions in their hearts. When the scale of concentration is expanded, they can even directly affect a passerby. We looked at the cloaked girl who continued to clean below as he spoke. He tilted his head and looked at Zhou Zibai. These are not natural products. Has anything happened in Jiang City? Zhou Zibai thought carefully and shook her head. I've lived in Jiang City for 20 years, and I haven't heard of any major events related to the entire Jiang City, whether it's on the surface or in the cultivation world. There's nowhere to touch it. Feng, do you see anything? Yin Nuoxing said, It's like a trace left by something. It's just a strand of aura left behind by it. The body, I don't know. As far as we know, there are more than 100,000 things that can achieve this effect. That's true. Hui nodded. However, at the same time, they could easily get rid of this negative aura. What they were concerned about was the cloaked girl who was purifying the aura along the way. She was a mysterious figure who had traces of energy and rule modification, and it was quite obvious. She ran away. The little girl spied unscrupulously from the angle of the void. She watched the cloaked girl deal with a negative aura in a block. She took advantage of the 5 people around her to disappear in an instant, and then appeared on the other side of Jiang City. They also watched the cloaked girl being busy in various places of Jiang City, and she gradually became irritable. At first, she used quite normal methods, sprinkling a handful of ashes, purifying an area, and so on. After a dozen times, she suddenly stopped sprinkling the ashes. She directly grabbed the negative aura with her hands, clenched her fists, and punched it into bubbles, not even leaving the ashes behind. I've used up all the things so quickly. Now I have to use my hands. The cloaked girl looked at her hands, sighed, and resigned to fate. She tightened her cloak and continued to run to the next place. As she ran, she muttered, "Bonus, bonus. This year's bonus will probably be used to buy all kinds of necessities. It's another big hole. I can't go shopping and eat. Oh, so she's used up all the items." We suddenly understood and said, "I feel like there are a lot of things to complain about, but it's hard to say clearly." Where is she?" While he was muttering, his line of sight was lost for less than half a second. Suddenly, he realized that the cloaked girl who was strolling on the street had disappeared without a trace. "I didn't use the law to lock on. I lost her." Yin Nuoxing blinked and tried to scan the surroundings a few times, but she couldn't find the girl's figure. After all, she was a person who had traces of law and energy modification. They suspected that she was an energy life form. In fact, they didn't use any auxiliary means. They just used their eyes to look. At most, they eliminated a relatively direct sense of being watched, making it difficult for her to find. They didn't expect to suddenly lose her. Phone, let's go to other places. For example, places with negative auras. Since she has to deal with those, she should appear again. When Hui said this, he dragged Zhou Zibai down and fell quickly. The unprepared straight fall made Zhou Zibai scream again. Sure enough, I still can't get used to straight falling and falling. Zhou Zibai sighed bitterly in her heart with tears in her eyes. After the 4 of them disappeared, the cloaked girl suddenly appeared at the corner of the alley. She looked around suspiciously and couldn't help but mutter, "Strange. Why do I feel like something is watching me today? Moreover, I can't find the person. It can't be that the higher-ups sent people to help me, and they're sneakily watching me from the side, right?" The cloaked girl muttered. Suddenly, she rolled up her sleeves and clenched her slender fists, revealing a terrifying smile. "Then, if I find them, I'll give them a good beating." The place where they landed was next to the river in Jiang City. Both sides of the river were flat and spacious, and similarly deserted long streets. The main roads on both sides of the river were straight, and there was no fork in the road for a few miles. It was normal for this kind of deserted place to have that kind of strange negative aura. Perhaps it was because it was easier to gather and spread in a sparsely populated place. The closer to the outskirts of the city, the more obvious the traces of its existence would be. Fortunately, there weren't many people in this place. When they fell in a straight line, they really fell and didn't suddenly appear on the road. If the scene was seen by others, then they would be hard to explain. The dark aura in this area seems to be stronger. Between the main road and the river, there was a sidewalk that was a few meters wide and a large green belt that was also a few meters wide. However, the green belt on this side was obviously not taken care of, and it had been abandoned. Dead branches and leaves were scattered all over the ground. This should be caused by that strange aura, and it had little to do with the lack of care. "It's probably one of the largest in Jiang City." Yin Nuoxing nodded, turned around, and walked to Zhou Zibai, who was squatting on the roadbed and retching. "Are you okay?" Zhou Zibai raised her head and showed him a green face. "Ugh, my heart is not good." He stretched out his hand and pressed on the little girl's head, letting a weak, pure energy soothe her stomach and head that were already overturned. Just as he was about to casually deal with that aura, A roaring sound suddenly interrupted the quiet atmosphere of the four of them. The four of them turned their eyes at the same time. A red sports car of an unknown brand suddenly rushed out of the road. It really did rush out. 10 seconds ago, this road was clearly empty, and there was no end to it. They didn't know where this thing came out of, and the sound was very loud. The roaring sound was like a series of explosions. Moreover, it was speeding on the sidewalk, and it didn't seem to have any intention of slowing down at all to rush towards the four of them. Phone, look at this speed, this power, and this momentum of rushing towards us. Just looking at it makes me want to kick it. Did it accelerate? I'm afraid it's over 200 or 300 miles per hour. After Zhou Zibai finished retching, she came back to her senses and saw that the red shadow seemed to be rushing towards them at 3 times the speed. She was so scared that she took 2 steps back on the grass. Aren't you afraid of rushing into the river? Phone, don't move. Just as Yin Nuoxing was about to take 2 steps to get out of the way, Hui hurriedly shouted, just stand there, right? Aim a little so that it can hit us right in the middle. Yin Nuoxing, are you crazy? Even if the sun shines on your face, nothing will happen to you. It's just a pile of high-speed scrap metal. Go ahead and hit it. Tell me how it feels. Yin Nuoxing rolled his eyes and took 2 steps to the side, indicating that he didn't want to accompany him. But unfortunately, the sports car that had turned into a shadow and was still accelerating slowly deviated from its direction. It was right in the middle of the car, and he was stunned for a moment. He subconsciously said, "Are you deliberately looking for a collision?" Although I don't think the driver meant it that way. Zhou Zibai said calmly. She was already quite calm. Even if the speed of the car was 10 times faster and dozens of times heavier, it probably wouldn't be able to hit the person in front of her. Whether it was intentional or not, it was too late to slow down. Unless Yin Nuoxing deliberately dodged, they would definitely hit it, and it would be a disaster like an egg hitting a rock. Then, the 3 unscrupulous fellows stood calmly at the side and watched the roaring sports car get closer and closer to Yin Nuoxing. They couldn't see the expression of the person in the car, but looking at the way it kept accelerating, they thought that it was going to send the former to the sky. As far as common sense and theory was concerned, whether a high-speed sports car or a motionless person was more sturdy, the answer was self-evident. However, this time there was a slight accident. Translator's note. As for Yin Nuoxing himself, he wanted to dodge. The fact that the attack was ineffective didn't mean that he liked to take the attack's effect. That was what Hui wanted to do. He liked to hit people and not be hit, so it was reasonable for him to dodge. So, just as he took a step to the side, he saw that the other side had adjusted its angle slightly and was charging straight at him. That was why he was energized. At this moment, if it weren't for the fact that he was in someone else's world, he would have already activated the magic circle or taken out the Netherworld Ruin Sword. How the enemy charging at him died. Everyone at the Void front line saw it for themselves. At this moment, he planned to use a simple method to deal with it, such as, hey, don't just stand there, quickly dodge. Bang! A loud noise, but it wasn't the loud noise caused by Yin Nuoxing and the red shadow. At the critical moment, a white shadow fell from the sky and landed heavily a little more than a meter in front of Yin Nuoxing. It hit the hood of the red sports car, and the latter instantly disintegrated, turning into dozens of pieces that continued to fly forward. The parts that fell to the ground exploded a few dozen meters away, probably due to the explosion of the fuel tank. There was also a shockwave, but no one knew if the shockwave was caused by the object that fell from the sky or the disintegration of the car like a cannon. Several parts of the car flew out and almost reached the other side of the river. Fireworks worth millions, Zhou Zibai said calmly. Zhou Zibai said calmly. She was really calm. After all, there was an invisible energy barrier in front of her. She looked at the barrier blocking the shockwave, so she was completely calm. Even if a piece of debris flew past her, she was not scared at all. The ground in front of Yin Nuoxing was cracked, and there were circles of cracks. It should be a 7 or 8 meter pit, but it didn't collapse. In front of her, the front 1/3 of the car was still there, and there was a seat. The person on the seat had obviously fainted. It was obviously abnormal for him to faint after such a collision. He should be protected by some kind of power. For example, the girl in the white robe. the white cloak that fell from the sky. The young girl kicked the non-combustible garbage that had turned into a pile of scrap metal in a second and kicked it away from the center of the road. She swung her hand and threw the person onto the grass. Then, she instantly jumped in front of Yin Nuashing. "Hey, are you okay?" Yin Nuashing pointed at herself. "Do I look like I'm not okay? Why didn't you dodge if you were okay? If I came 3 seconds later, you would have flown into the sky." Hui and the other two covered their mouths. They really wanted to say, "If you didn't come, the red car might have been even worse." The energy light that lingered on Yun Nuashing's body had its own counterattack. She had just rushed up, and the ground had already sunk. However, the girl in the cloak really came over. It seemed that she had just arrived here and saw the impending disaster, so she stopped it. "You strange. Eh?" The girl in the cloak suddenly froze as she spoke. She looked at Yin Nuashing and couldn't help but frown. The angle that she looked up at, and the face that she had a slight impression of, "Have we met before?" It had only been an hour or so, and this girl had already forgotten about them. It seemed that she was really in a hurry and didn't care about anything. She was slightly similar to them. Yin Nuashing thought for a moment, and a plan emerged in her heart. She put her palms together and said to the girl, "Taoist priest, exorcism." The girl in the cloak instantly understood and jumped up. She almost hit his chin with her head. She pointed at him and shouted, "You guys followed me? It's obvious. We were just wandering around here." Yin Nuashing shook her head and pointed at the driver that she had thrown on the grass like trash. "Let's not talk about this first. Who is that? How would I know?" The girl in the cloak suddenly changed the topic and looked at the fainted guy lying there, racing on the sidewalk. Have people become so savage these years? "I just came here and saw you guys." "So who are you guys?" Yin Nuashing rolled her eyes. Why did this girl come back to the topic again? "Feng, this person is still alive." We waved his hand, and Yin Nuashing walked over. The girl quickly reached out her hand, but she didn't catch it. She had no choice but to follow. The person who survived was obviously a young man in his 20s or 30s. There were no wounds on his body. He was wearing ordinary clothes, casual clothes, and a pair of slippers. At this moment, one of the slippers had already flown out. As for the others, they couldn't do anything because the person was unconscious. The life in this place was a little too weak. They hadn't recovered from a state where they would explode at the slightest touch. The level of energy used at this moment was still quite high. If they used their means to search the young man's memory or something, his soul would probably be burned up as soon as they touched him. "Don't look. He's not dead." The girl circled around and jumped into Yun Nuashing's line of sight. She bent down and looked up at them from below. "You guys don't look like ordinary people, right?" We waved his hand vigorously. No, we're just ordinary people. Ordinary people can't not dodge a car that's going at more than 400 kilometers per hour. When the scene explodes, they can still maintain a calm attitude." The girl in the cloak giggled. Suddenly, she moved closer to Yin Nuashing. "Come and help. I have a reward, and it's definitely something you can't imagine. There won't be any danger." We hurriedly moved closer and pretended to be very nervous. "You tell us first. We'll listen. If the situation isn't right, we'll refuse." "No. If you listen, you have to help me." The girl in the cloak shook her head vigorously. Her blonde hair swayed. She clenched her hands and said very seriously, "This is a very important matter. If it weren't for the fact that you guys aren't ordinary people and seem to be very free, I wouldn't have come to you guys." We smiled bitterly. How are they very free? Well, they were on vacation. In fact, they were quite free for the time being. To put simply, we're actually looking for something. We haven't agreed yet. If you don't open your mouth, isn't that a yes? Yin Nuashing tilted her head and looked at Hui. "She's as good as you. I'm talking about action. Isn't talking to yourself your talent?" Hui bared his teeth at her. Okay, we're indeed quite free now. But for you to randomly find a coolie on the street, we're really a little. Hui forced himself to stop talking. After thinking for a long time, he replaced the word pain in the ass with new words. "We're a little at a loss. So what are you looking for?" "I don't know." The girl in the cloak shook her head. Yin Nuashing and the others. If they didn't know that this girl wasn't human, They would definitely suspect that some girl had nothing better to do and was playing a joke on them. Because I don't know. I'm looking for help. The girl in the cloak scratched her head and knocked it with her hand to act cute. Hey, retreat. Don't. I really don't know what it is, but if I see it, I can recognize it immediately. This is the only thing I'm sure of. If that thing falls into the hands of someone with bad intentions, it will definitely cause a lot of trouble. If it's not handled properly, my bonus this year will definitely go down the drain. When that time comes, I can only sit alone in a corner and be battered by the wind and rain, disappearing without dignity. But that's not the point. What's important is that the place you live will definitely be turned into a mess because of that thing. It might even be destroyed tomorrow. So you must help me. Phew. Let me catch my breath. Zhou Jibai. Okay, just now when Mr. Hui said that she was not a human, she was a little hesitant and did not accept it. Now she understood. A sentence without a breath, and only a breath. This was something that no human could do. Yin Washing looked at the girl in the cloak, who was hugging her right leg and crying pitifully. She rolled her eyes. You've said so much. Why don't you tell us what that thing is? How do we find it? Do you have any clues? Yes, there must be. The girl suddenly jumped up and pointed to a green field in front of them. It will leave this trace wherever it appears. You should be able to see it, right? Yin Nuashing and the others turned their gazes. The place the girl pointed to was the place where the dark aura remained. And at this moment, there were some abnormal changes which only appeared after she arrived. The girl rushed up before the aura jumped out. She grabbed the air quickly and punched with her slender hand, shattering the aura in front of her into pieces. It's actually very easy to eliminate it. The difficult part is... The girl in the cloak scratched her head. I don't know where it went. Why is there an energy leak? It even seems to be moving. I don't know. She turned around, clapped her hands together, and said to Yin Nuashing, "Help me, beautiful big brother." We couldn't help but exclaim. It's rare that someone can recognize it. Chapter 1775. To be honest, we felt that the caped girl who was jumping around in front of him was the kind of person who forgot to bring a bottle of soy sauce when she went out and forgot to bring her house key when she returned. She suddenly appeared and involved them in something. Although they were bored and wanted to have some fun, they didn't mind. Besides, they were a little interested in her, so they didn't mind. However, they still wanted to say that they were passive and had a precondition, so they accepted it. If it were someone else, they might have just left. Good heavens. They accepted a mission to find something, and the mission description did not give any other clues except for the disaster traces left behind by the thing. It was like he was pointing to the chaotic void at everyone in the void front line. Go find it. The result was that he was slapped into the chaotic void by Foam. He did not add a few seals and debuffs on the way. That was because Foam did not want him to die and was merciful. He shook his head and threw away the terrible thought. He spread his hands and said to the caped girl, "Well, little girl who seems to be unable to provide any useful clues, tell me what you originally planned to do and how you plan to deal with it." Actually, the girl suddenly broke out in cold sweat. She lowered her head and stammered. "Are you going to say that you have no idea at all?" He narrowed his eyes and guessed with a faint smile. No, I definitely have an idea." The girl quickly jumped up and waved her hands. "First, we will deal with the traces left behind, and then we will follow the traces and keep searching?" The little girl suddenly asked. Seeing the cloaked girl nod awkwardly, the little girl's expression immediately became a little strange. Isn't this method the same as hers? Running all over the great origin realm, chasing the traces here and there. This time, it's just a small place. There is no better way for now. This is the only way. The caped girl scratched her head. Let's talk as we walk. There are still many places to deal with. After the 5 of them left, there was only the tragic scene of the car accident. Dozens of pieces of debris were placed on the ground, swaying and creaking in the strong wind by the river. When they left, they put out the fire, leaving behind a charred area. About a minute later, the young man who was thrown on the turf like a piece of trash suddenly shuddered and jumped up from the ground like a carp. He shook his body for a while, as if he was having convulsions. lowering his head to look around. He hurriedly looked for the other missing slipper. The wind is bleak and the water is cold. Ah, I really want to go home. After a long while, the young man sat on the seat that was thrown aside with one of his legs crossed. Looking at the sports car that only 1/3 of its original body was left in front of him, he revealed a bleak expression. His voice was full of bewilderment and haggardness. He let out a long sigh and touched his body a few times before taking out a pair of earphones that were fortunately not broken from his trouser pocket and put them on his ears. His tone was bleak and tired. "Hey, it's me. I've confirmed that there are people in Jiang City looking for traces of that thing. 100%, and it's powerful? No. At least we can confirm that there's a monster on the other side. Get someone to clean up the scene. 1/3 of my treasure has evaporated, 1/3 is embedded in the ground, and 1/3 is in the river. If you don't reimburse me, I'll retire immediately." "No, wait, don't claim it. I'm going to retire right away. I can't handle this. Don't yell at me. It's settled. Sorry for disturbing you. Goodbye." The young man pinched the 2 wireless headphones and crushed them with both hands. He continued to look down at the debris in front of him with a melancholy expression. On my car, he then looked back at the parts that were floating in the river and drifting away with the river. He could not help but shed tears. There are thousands of roads. It's safe. Mama, I won't race anymore. At this moment, the group of people who had just shattered the young man's worldview into a mess were jumping up and down in Jiang City. They ran all over the city. Occasionally, they would go to the sewers or break into people's houses or directly rush into other people's company buildings. They were simply stirring up the entire city into a pool of muddy water. On the surface, a lot of effort was saved due to the presence of a certain eldest daughter of the Zhou family. But even so, it still attracted a lot of people's attention. These things are normal. I'm used to it. Zhou Zibai was floating 3,000 meters in the sky. She glanced at the sesame-sized house below and shivered. She quickly hugged Yin Nuoxing. "We're not as carefree as we look on the surface. Our every move will be watched. Some people will find ways to watch us. If there's any movement, the information will appear on other people's tables in a few minutes. If I'm not surprised, many people should know that I followed you all over Jiang City today. But you don't have to worry about it. Those things are not important." Zhou Zibai looked down again and shivered. "Compared to that, how long do we have to fly?" This smart girl seemed to be afraid of nothing. She just couldn't stand the feeling of being hung in the sky. "Standing high, you can see further. I don't think this is high. We can only overlook the entire city. This place is round. It's even harder to see further. How about we fly higher?" We looked down at the entire city and remembered the places that were entangled by the dark aura. He gave Zhou Zibai a thumbs up. "How about going to the top of the atmosphere to see the stars?" No, thank you." Zhou Zibai smiled bitterly. She might be dead if she went there. Come to think of it, we turned around and looked at the ground below. The dark aura in Jiang City had mostly been eliminated during their half a day of work. However, when he tried to look into the distance along the main roads leading to the outskirts of the city, the outskirts and the barren mountains, the dark aura was constantly emitting out like smoke from kitchen chimneys. Some of them had already reached a rather large scale. It's strange. The day we landed, I didn't seem to see such an exaggerated extent. We communicated with foam in his soul, or did I just look at the scenery and didn't notice? Yin Nuoxing and the little girl both rolled their eyes. This guy was indeed looking at the scenery and didn't even know that he had fallen into the ground. However, it was not to the extent that he couldn't see it. They really didn't see this dense dark aura that day. These things weren't here at first, at least not a few days ago. Yin Nuoxing looked at the cloaked girl who was sweating profusely. "Do you know anything?" This had only appeared a while after it left. In the beginning, the scale of the remnant aura was so small that even you and I couldn't detect it. By the time it grew to the point where it could be easily detected, some time had already passed. The corners of the cloaked girl's mouth trembled slightly, revealing a rather distressed expression. "But why are there so many traces? It's moving too frequently, and each trace is clearer than the previous one. It also contains more energy. Its seal has been broken, and more energy is leaking out. Well, this girl was starting to panic again. Now she was already muttering about her bonus, performance, and so on. We couldn't help but whisper in her ear what happened to maintaining world peace. The cloaked girl tilted her head and rolled her eyes at him. Maintaining world peace also requires strength. If I don't have any achievements, my bonus will be deducted, and I won't even be able to use my items. Now, I can only use my own hands to knock away those. Every time I touch those things, my hands feel numb and uncomfortable. Without items, I can't do a large-scale scan to search for them while maintaining my safety. Then, I'll change my direction. No matter how much I want to maintain world peace, I still need to eat. Well, I don't need to eat, but that's what I mean. Rushing forward while daydreaming, without thinking while waving my hands, is such a terrible thing that only a rookie would do. Hui smiled bitterly. He didn't want to mention it. This girl was quite magical. Well, at least they hadn't seen any life that could fly on this planet. When she just rose into the air in front of them, she didn't show any signs of nervousness when she saw them also rising into the air. At this moment, a melodious ringtone suddenly sounded, attracting the attention of Yun Nuoxing and the others. Zhou Zibai, who was half stunned and half frightened, heard the sound of her mobile phone. She took it out with a trembling hand and put it to her ear. After hearing only one sentence, she handed the phone to Yun Nuoxing. "Phone Ling, it's for you. Oh, you guys are having a good time in Jiang City." As soon as Yun Nuoxing put her ear to the phone, she heard a familiar voice. She said softly, "Oh, it's you. What do you mean by having a good time?" Of course, it's the two things that made a loud bang by the river and ran around Jiang City like a ghost. It scared a dozen or so people and made them lose their minds. They thought they saw a ghost in broad daylight. The young man in blue sighed on the other end. "You guys seem to be dealing with something. You guys seem to be being watched. Who exactly is it?" "I just asked Uncle Lou. He's not very clear. It seems that he's hiding very well." "Being watched? Who would be so bored to watch us?" The young man in blue was silent for a moment. "It's about the car accident." Yun Nuoxing and the others all let out a long "oh." When we got there, the people were already gone. The scene was cleaned up by a group of unidentified people. We followed the clues and didn't find anything too special. "Wait a minute. Uncle Lou is looking for me." The young man in blue stopped talking for a while. He waited patiently for a while. Yun Nuoxing waited patiently for a minute. The voice on the other end sounded again. "Oh, there's a little progress. Uncle Lou said that he found a group of strange people. If I'm not mistaken, they should be related to the people who drove the car and attacked you guys just now. As for their identity and what they're doing, we don't know anything. The people we caught used a little trick to get them to give us a place in Jiang City. Uncle Lou asked me to come and ask for your help. I heard that the other side is quite strong. The Alliance suffered a lot of losses when confronting them head-on. We responded at the side. We're also busy with other things here. Can't you handle this?" "I haven't recovered my strength yet, but it's not like I can't handle it." The young man in blue let out a few laughs. "It's just that, there's something I can't leave. Well, the people living with me are on the verge of going berserk because a certain idiot hasn't been at home for a long time. They order me not to leave for 3 days. Otherwise, bang." Suddenly, there was a loud noise from the other side. There were also a few shouts. Then, the voice of the young man in blue instantly panicked. Oh, that's it. I have something to do here. I'll hang up first. If I don't hang up, I'll die. This time, please help me first." The voice stopped abruptly. Yun Nuoxing and the others were a little silent. They looked at each other and sighed at the blue sky. That guy didn't have it easy. "Do you have something to do?" The cloaked girl stroked her blonde hair and said, "Then let's go and take a look first. I'm not in a hurry here. Let me think if there's any way to speed things up. If we continue to deal with this slowly, I'm afraid that we won't even get to the door when something happens." So, this matter suddenly switched from the main line to a sideline. After all, that guy was also from the original 8 Elements realm. Since they met in the distant 3 Elements realm, it was fate. They would help as much as they could. After all, they were so idle that they were looking for fun. No, looking for things to do. There was nothing in the three elements realm that could threaten them. Even in the chaos void, there was nothing that could do anything to them, not to mention that they were now on a planet with life which was still in a sealed state. They could basically do whatever they wanted. If there was any trouble, they could just kill their way over. No, although we have the Alliance as our backer, we can't attract too much attention. Zhou Zibai understood the expressions of Yin Nuoxing and the others. She quickly grabbed his hand and shook her head. If we attract too much attention, it won't be easy for the higher-ups to respond to the public. It won't be easy to deal with the Alliance of Cultivators. We are people who are hiding in the dark. Zhou Zibai, who had seen their strength, was really worried that they would get excited and collapse the ground. Then it would be an international incident. She didn't know whether it would be a natural disaster or someone secretly sabotaging. In any case, it was the same in Huaxia. Even if there was a slight disturbance, some people would keep talking about it. That's right. For some reason, the cloaked girl suddenly got excited. She put her hands on her hips and said with an arrogant face, "We have to do things neatly and neatly. We don't leave any traces behind. When we're done, we have to leave for the people in the shadows." I'm just talking nonsense. It's fine as long as it sounds that way. Yin Nuoxing rolled his eyes. To hell with the people in the shadows. I'm going to be unparalleled and give this place to... Oh, don't be unparalleled. If you are unparalleled, all of us will be in trouble. We pressed down hard on the guy who was about to get to the top of his head. He waved his hand and fell to the ground. Anyway, we have to do that, something. Let's go. Seeing the two falling quickly with one person, Zhou Zibai began to scream again. The cloaked girl scratched her head and looked confused. Why are they suddenly more excited than me? Oh, don't mind them. They're just like that. They'll get excited for no reason, and they'll suddenly get excited for no reason. The little girl shrugged and followed him leisurely. It was a moonless and windy night. It was quiet all around. The rotten smell of rust and old water lingered at the tip of his nose. The air here was mixed with more strange smells, which made him feel nauseous. He opened his eyes and looked around. Even though he had adapted to the darkness of the night, he could see the outline of a lot of things in a mess. However, he couldn't see more clearly. There were street lamps outside, but they had already been smashed. There were a few openings on the wall that were a few meters high. The cold wind came in through the broken glass windows and blew in the empty space. It brought a gust of cold wind that made him shiver. He really hoped that those people would leave him a coat so that he wouldn't be frozen here like a grandson. In the late autumn night, the air was cold when it poured into his lungs, forcing him to stay awake. There seemed to be a distant light in the darkness, but it was just a flash. It was probably the lights of a car on the side of the road. Unfortunately, it was too far away. He was locked in an empty, big iron sheet, and the people in the car were also locked in a small iron sheet. There was still a long distance between them. Even if he tried his best to make some noise, it probably wouldn't be noticed. His hands that were tied behind his back moved slightly. He wanted to get warm, and he also wanted to scratch his back that suddenly itched. He had no choice but to move his body and rub it against the pillar next to him. He couldn't adjust the angle well, and he even pinched his flesh. It was so painful that he sucked in a cold breath. How did things become like this? He didn't know. He couldn't be sure. It was just very inexplicable. It was a little strange. Today, when he passed by the rundown house, he was caught sneezing. He didn't know why, but 7 or 8 men in black swarmed him and pinned him to the ground. His posture looked like he was about to be taken to the police station and handcuffed to the radiator. However, he was just an ordinary student. The only bad thing he had done so far was to peek at the love letter left on the podium. He didn't know who left it there, but at that time, no one should have seen it. While his imagination was running wild, when he came back to his senses, he was already thrown into this godforsaken place. When there was light in the afternoon, he could still see this place, but now it was dark. He couldn't see anything. He didn't know what was going to happen, and he didn't know why he was caught and thrown here. If he was going to be beaten up, he might have some idea of what he had offended, what he had done wrong, or what he had seen. But how could they tie him up and throw him to the side? He wouldn't freeze to death in this godforsaken place, would he? Well, I can't hide anymore. If I continue to hide, I'll become a popsicle before I can find a chance. He took a deep breath and gathered a stream of air around his body. A weak stream of energy circulated in his body, spreading heat throughout his body, making him feel much better. While he was doing this, he looked around vigilantly, paying particular attention to the door of the abandoned factory. If it opened with a bang, he would have to quickly retract his spirit energy. This was the only special thing about him. However, he had never used his spiritual energy in front of anyone. Currently, he was just an honest student. Heroes and saving the world had nothing to do with him. He didn't want to do something that would endanger his life. It was better to be an honest student. He would graduate, practice, and work honestly. He would put this matter in the bottom of his heart and pretend that nothing had happened. That would be enough. He would hide his fantasies and dreams deep in his dreams. This was the most ordinary life that belonged to him. But it's still cold. He sighed secretly. At this time, no one had come to deal with him. Should he have run away from the beginning? No, what if there was someone outside? Should he sneak out now in the dark? Just as he was thinking about whether or not to take action, a dazzling bright red light suddenly reflected on the wall in front of him. It was getting more and more obvious, more and more dazzling. It was so dazzling that even the weak reflection of the light made him have to close his eyes. Boom! It was as if a few hundred tons of bombs had exploded, and the sound came from a few hundred meters away. The impact, it wasn't too violent. Most of it was just sound. This was very abnormal. This was very unscientific. It was as if the impact was all restrained, but the sound was not suppressed. "Grandson, get up and come and hit me." A clamor sounded outside the factory, loud and clear with the explosion tearing through the cold wind of the night. Then he heard a burst of gunfire and the sound of gunfire. He couldn't help but feel lucky that he didn't rush out rashly. Otherwise, he might have been shot into a sieve by a shuttle of bullets. What's wrong? Is there an attack outside? He quickly calmed down. The uneasiness that had been dormant jumped out again, making him a little excited and nervous. He thought for a moment and gathered his spiritual aura on his hands. He broke free of his tied hands and tore off the tape on his mouth. Just as he was about to take 2 steps forward, the wall not far from his left side suddenly, clang. The entire wall was violently torn down. Gravel and iron sheets fell to the ground with a pitter-patter, and the ceiling shook. Then a gorgeous figure walked in through the gap. She looked around and suddenly quickly walked inside. She said to a certain guy lying on the ground, "Don't play dead. Hurry up and get up. Let's go." Huh. He quickly opened his eyes and sat up. The gorgeous figure rushed into his line of sight, causing his breathing to stagnate. This girl was so beautiful. She really touched his heart. It was like the warm spring sun shining into his heart, making, no, now wasn't the time to talk about this. "Aren't you in cahoots with the people here?" "In cahoots?" Yun Noashing turned around and used her thumb to point at the place where the flames soared into the sky. "Look at this commotion. It's as if they want to sink the entire place into the sea. Do you think we're in cahoots?" Amidst the rumbling sound, there was an arrogant and wild laughter mixed in. There was also a group of strange screams and screams. He seemed to hear someone shouting, "Mommy." It was really lively. "All right, kid. I just saw a weak eye trapped here, so I came over to take a look. If you're worried, come with us first and let them settle you down." His eyes flickered as he looked at the gorgeous figure. He lifted his feet and followed her in a daze. Chapter 1776. The moonlit sky was illuminated by the soaring flames. In the suburbs far away from the city center, the fire had engulfed several abandoned factories. The flames and heat waves were spreading. The howling wind was mixed with the roar of guns and the sound of bullets tearing through the air. The flames cast their elongated shadows on the walls of the factories that were not burned. He looked at the raging fire and subconsciously moved away from it. The heat waves licked at him and made his spiritual energy protection appear too weak. In the fire and the surrounding open space, he seemed to see figures lying on the ground. Rifles and submachine guns were scattered on the ground. This was the first time he saw such things. He tried to identify them. Well, actually, he did not need to identify them. He could tell that they were real just by listening to the sporadic gunshots around him. Are they just leaving them here? He looked at the people lying on the ground and could not help but ask, "Why? Do you know them?" "No, I don't know them." He shook his head slightly and looked around, trying to find the people who brought him here. "I was kidnapped by them today. They brought me here for no reason." "Well, I'm a little concerned." Yin Nuashing tilted her head slightly and glanced at the young man who was one step behind her. The young man? Well, the big boy, 10 or 21 or 22 years old. He should have reached the end of his growth period in terms of height. His face still looked childish, and he did not have a beard like a precocious boy. In short, he looked very young. "We are here to deal with this place. The people who are hiding here seem to be doing something terrible," Yin Nuashing casually said to attract the big boy's attention. "So why are you here? Why were you kidnapped?" "I don't know." The big boy scratched his head and recalled what happened today. "Today, other than peeking at someone's love letter, I didn't encounter any special situation. I went shopping in the afternoon and passed by a rundown house. I looked inside and sneezed. Then I was held down. Then I was kidnapped into a car and brought here." As he spoke, he spread out his hands. When he saw Yin Nuashing's slightly stunned expression, he couldn't help but take a few more glances at her. This girl is so beautiful even when she's stunned. TSK. That's why it's not the time to talk about this. That's all I know. You didn't meet any lunatics? And you didn't touch anything you shouldn't have? Big Boy shook his head vigorously to clear himself of suspicion. Speaking of this matter, he was still confused. Too many things had happened today, so much so that it felt like a dream. In just half a day, he had been kidnapped and rescued. Now he was watching the flames engulfing the abandoned factory, and there were people screaming "Mommy" over there. There was also a devilish laughter, which overlapped with the crackling of the flames and the heat waves of the wind. How exciting. This scene is really exciting. He couldn't help but take out his phone and take 2 pictures, planning to post them in his circle later. Then, the only thing I can think of is the spiritual energy on your body. Other than that, either you've offended someone and don't know, or you're an unlucky passerby who was involved. Big Boy's expression changed, and his phone was almost thrown into the sea of fire by his trembling hand. He looked at Yin Nuashing with a bit of surprise and uncertainty. You can see the spiritual energy on my body? Could it be that you're also? I'm not, but I know that there are many lives like you. We came here because of the mission that those people issued at the last minute. While Yin Nuashing was talking casually, they had already crossed the area formed by the sea of fire and came to a more open area. Zhou Zibai and the cloak girl were waiting there. In front of them was a pile of people who had fainted or were tied up into a human pyramid. You're back. These are the people you saw trapped inside. Are there any other guys? When the cloak girl saw Yin Nuashing coming back, she threw away the person in her hand and went to greet them. She looked at Big Boy from head to toe and said, "He seems ordinary. He's just an ordinary child. God knows why they brought him in. There's no other life, aura, inside." While Yin Nuashing was speaking, the few of them suddenly heard the roar of an engine. Turning their heads, in the spacious open space behind them, more than a dozen heavily armed vehicles rushed over from all directions. The car closest to them rushed to a meter in front of him, and the door also bounced open with the people inside. It was the people of the Alliance of Cultivators. A large group of people rushed out of the vehicles, and all of them were fully armed. They even took out their magical weapons. It was just that, when they saw the scene of the fire in front of them, they were stunned for a moment, wondering if they should put out the fire or help set it on fire. Although that kid asked you to come and help, isn't this too big of a commotion? Lu Weiran got out of one of the vehicles and walked to Yin Nuashing. Looking at the group of people piled up in front of them like a human pyramid, his face twitched a few times. Is everyone here? Yin Nuashing raised his hand and pointed at the fire. Hui is still beating people up inside. He will probably come out in another minute. Hearing this, Lu Weiran sighed. Did you get anything out of them? I don't know where this strange organization got such a large number of armed forces. He looked at the 100 or 200 guns piled up on the ground, and his face twitched again. They're not ordinary people. Even the bullets they use are specially designed to deal with cultivators. No. When these people came out, they were all unconscious. Even if we wanted to ask them, there's no one to ask. The one who spoke was the cloaked girl. She shrugged at everyone. Just take them away for interrogation. By the way, there's also an unlucky brat who got involved. You can deal with him as well. Big Boy smiled bitterly. What the hell is a brat? You obviously look younger, right? Foam. It's done. Hey, someone come and clean up. Just in time. You guys can go and put out the fire. Hui walked out of the place, illuminated by the sea of fire, unhurriedly, dragging dozens of figures behind him. Everyone looked at the sea of fire that stretched out for 100 meters and pondered in silence. Should they call for 100 fire brigade to come and help? Or find 20 or 30 magical artifacts that could release water? That they didn't understand, they didn't know, yes, they didn't know. Fortunately, the abandoned factory was surrounded by open space. The nearest distance was less than 50 meters away from the river, where the water source separated this area from the residential area of Jiang City. No matter how much the fire burned, it wouldn't affect the residential area. Hey, these people didn't bring anything with them. There's nothing in their pockets. I heard you guys say that they're a group of important members, but they look more like a group of handymen. They don't even have any information. After searching for half a day, I only found a coin from each of them. Hui flicked the coin with a ding sound, and it landed on the place where 100 or 200 people were stacked together. Everyone looked at the large group of people and then looked at the 200 or 300 disarm guns. They were a little bit silent. This place was heavily defended with heavy firepower. Only airplanes, tanks, and cannons were missing. Anyway, I'll leave this to you guys. I'm tired today. Go back and rest. Hui reached out and patted Lu Weiron's shoulder. He turned around and left with his people, leaving the group of people in the alliance looking at each other. Big Boy scratched his head. They left so quickly. We didn't even talk much. I don't even know who they are. Lu Weiron couldn't help but roll her eyes. She squatted on the ground and looked at the group of people piled together. She stood up and waved her hand. Call some people over. There are 100 or 200 people here. We can't handle it with just one team. This is great. We couldn't catch one person before, but now there are 100 or 200 captives who are still alive. It's a bit of a headache to have so many people. Sir, how do we explain this fire? Lu Weiron held her forehead and looked at the burning fire with pain. She pondered for a moment and sighed. Just say, the smuggled gasoline was improperly stored and accidentally ignited the abandoned factory. Just use a title to explain it away. The night passed quietly. When the sun came the next day, the fire in the suburbs last night had become the information that everyone who saw it exchanged information with each other. It was like a secret signal. The first thing they opened their mouth was, did you know that there was a big fire in the suburbs last night? And so on. The newspaper and television were also broadcasting what happened last night on a loop. The images that were shown were already of the situation where the fire was soaring into the sky. The smuggled gasoline explosion. Uncle Lou can even think of this reason. I'm afraid there are hundreds of tons of gasoline used as bonfires to create such a mighty scene. The blue-clothed young man looked at the image on the television and jumped up from the sofa with a poof. He glanced at the information on the television. Some of the bodies seemed to be found in the almost burned abandoned factory. They were the people who went missing frequently during this period of time. There were no signs of life before the fire. He couldn't help but hold his chin and ponder. It's almost certain that the people who disappeared recently in Jiang City are related to them. Although the number doesn't exactly match, it's generally so. Jiang City, Sioux City, Lin City, Imperial City, Shanghai. The blue-clothed young man recited the names of 30 to 40 places. He sighed and scratched his head. This range is too big. Uncle Lou will probably be too busy. Not every place is like Jiang City, where there are abnormal people guarding it. In recent years, they had not encountered an incident of this scale. First of all, they could confirm that the other party was a team. If there were no accidents, the internal members were not ordinary people. There were also some dangerous people among them. They went back and forth in China, and there were obvious movements in 30 to 40 places. However, it was difficult to find them. They did not know where the other party got so many troops from. The alliance of cultivators spent a Herculean effort but could not find any traces of the flow of goods. The guns that Uncle Lou and the others seized last night were obviously new models. It looked like they were haunted. It was as if the people on the other side all came out of the ground. The things in their hands were made of air. They did not need any supplies other than firearms and relied purely on photosynthesis to survive. Moreover, they only knew that they were indiscriminately arresting rogue cultivators. Those who went missing were most likely the same as what was said on the news. As for their purpose, no one knew. This was really preposterous. As expected, we have to deal with preposterous things using preposterous methods. The young man in blue stood up with a bang. He casually packed up and was ready to go out. After living here for more than 20 years, his thoughts had unknowingly returned to the state of this place. He had not had the time to use the memories that he had just obtained a few days ago. Moreover, he did not know when he would be able to use them again. This little troublemaker is too naughty. I have to teach him a good lesson. In this case, it's time to use some outside forces. Just as he finished packing up and was about to go out, a delicate voice suddenly rushed down from the second floor of the luxurious villa. "Where are you sneaking off to this time? Which little vixen are you going to see again?" The young man in blue was calm and composed. He rushed out of the door without even changing his shoes in the Zhou family's villa in the suburbs of Jiang City. Due to last night's big commotion, everyone seemed to have released some pressure and had a good night's sleep. When they came downstairs in the morning, they saw Yin Nuoxing curled up on the sofa like a sculpture. When she saw them coming down, she turned her head and gestured to them. "Hey, you didn't sleep all night?" The girl in the cloak jumped onto the sofa and sat next to him. She said earnestly, "Young people should pay more attention to rest. It's late at night. Naturally, you should have a good rest." "I don't need to sleep." Yin Nuoxing shook her head and used her chin to point at the unfinished broadcast on the TV. Several people turned their heads and looked at it. What happened last night has been spread out." Hui scratched his cheek. "Generally speaking, that kind of thing should be suppressed as much as possible. Just pretend that nothing happened and don't say anything. That's impossible." Zhou Zibai had more or less adapted to the situation of several people who were obviously powerful but lacked some common sense. She explained, "Now, as long as there is a little big movement, it will be known by everyone. What's more, last night's disturbance was in the suburbs, which is not particularly far away. Many people must have known at night. There's no way to suppress it. Even if some other facts are used to cover it up, it must be broadcasted." Zhou Zibai paused. "Although some people will doubt it and make an issue out of it, as long as the general direction is not deviated, there will be no problem. But what about gasoline? Even if hundreds of tons of gasoline were used to create the effect, she was very curious about how the fire last night burned. Last night, she was just arranged to hide in the back. She saw Feng Ling and Mr. Hui stand up and rush forward. The enemy flew out, and then the whole world rumbled, and the fire came out. Well, she actually didn't know what happened." Hui touched his chin and thought, "If I throw a meteorite into the city, the next day, the surface of the earth will be gone." Yin Nuoxing rolled her eyes. "You always say that I'm making big news. Don't you have a brain full of explosions? Well, let's seriously discuss it." Hui also leaned on the sofa and stretched. He was about to casually chat with Feng Ling. Suddenly, he saw that the girl in the cloak's expression was a little strange. He couldn't help but ask, "What's wrong? Did you find any traces?" The girl in the cloak came back to her senses and suddenly showed an embarrassed smile. Her face was full of sweat. "Oh, I forgot a very important thing. In the fire yesterday, there seems to be the remnants of that thing's aura." As soon as these words came out, the air in the hall suddenly froze. Yin Nuoxing also slowly turned her head to look at someone's delicate face. She calmly said, "I'm not going to help. Don't." This was the first time we saw someone who could jump up from the sofa, flip in the air for 3.5 times, and then fall down on the sofa with a perfect kneeling position. I was just surprised yesterday. Well, accident. When you saw the scene of the fire, you suddenly became excited and forgot your purpose." Yin Nuoxing glanced at her and continued to speak calmly. Because of this sentence, more and more sweat appeared on her face. Little girl, don't forget that this is about your own bonus. We don't care what this place becomes, so don't think that this condition will become my move. Don't. Zhou Zibai suddenly moved to Yin Nuoxing's side and hugged his arm with both hands. She hurriedly said, more or less, you still have to care about Yin Nuoxing. No, this was obviously a question of words. This girl in the cloak was obviously a bit careless. Her brain was only half-threaded. If this continued, who knew how much time it would take? He just wanted to remind someone. Although to himself, it was completely because Hui was foolishly laughing by himself, and he couldn't do anything to Hui, so he was just accompanying him and laughing. As for being a little interested in the cloaked girl, could he just say that it was a 3-minute enthusiasm, and now the enthusiasm had already dissipated? Someone's coming. Yin Nuoxing suddenly stood up and walked in the direction of the door. Several people in the hall turned to look in the direction of the door. Just as he walked to the door, he suddenly heard someone shouting, Mr. Hui, open the door. We have something to do. The voice came on time, and Yin Nuoxing opened the door on time. 2 figures appeared in his line of sight. One was the blue-clothed young man who had inexplicably walked around the 8 Elements realm and the 3rd Elements realm, and the other was a petite and beautiful girl with a ponytail. However, at this time, the girl's mood seemed a bit gloomy, especially when she saw him open the door. Suddenly, she pointed at his face and shouted at the blue-clothed young man, Who is this woman? Puffed. There was the sound of someone spitting out a mouthful of water in the hall. Judging by the sound, it should be made by the girl in the cloak. Although the other people were already used to it, they couldn't help but laugh at this moment. Their faces were as red as pig liver. Yin Nuoxing looked at the blue-clothed young man. He looked at the girl whose mood was unstable and whose mind was filled with a lot of terrible ideas that would make the air within 1,000,000 miles very uncomfortable. He couldn't help but ask the former, Your girlfriend? Cohabitation. I told you last time. The blue-clothed young man scratched his head awkwardly. He lowered his head and hurriedly said in the girl's ear, Feng Ling is a man. Who are you lying to? No one on the street will believe you with this face of yours. She couldn't finish her sentence. Firstly, she felt that the atmosphere in the hall was not right at this moment. It was very funny. Secondly, she looked at Yin Nuoxing pulling down his collar and pinching his barely recognizable Adam's apple. Her pretty face suddenly showed a touch of embarrassment that, Are you really a man? Of course I am. Yin Nuoxing let out a long sigh of relief. He turned sideways and led the girl into the room. As he walked, he said, Close the door. Tell me, is it the follow-up or a new trouble? Can I say that it's both of them? The blue-clothed young man grinned and showed a distressed look. Now we are in big trouble. A group of ghost-like things are running around in Huaxia. They have ghost-like origins and ghost-like actions. Anyway, they look like ghosts. They come and go without a trace. I can't even find a trace. If it weren't for the camera that captured this group of ghost-like things to prove that they do exist, I would have suspected that it was haunted. After greeting Zhou Zibai, the blue-clothed young man sat on the sofa in distress and held his face. I have no clue, so I flew here early in the morning to ask for your help. Within the specifications? Outside the specifications? Hui asked straightforwardly with his arms crossed. Probably. We need some methods outside the specifications. The blue-clothed young man rubbed his forehead in distress. After all, we have almost done everything that can be done within the specifications. Well, it just so happens that we have something else on our side. We can probably link the 2 things together. Hui turned his head and looked at the girl in the cloak. Seeing that the latter nodded, he felt relieved and said the matter. Looking for something, when the blue-clothed young man listened to them talk about the trouble that seemed to be linked together, he frowned for the first time. Is it the one I told you about last time? I don't know. At least we haven't encountered anything bizarre so far. Hui shook his head. The blue-clothed young man's face trembled. I don't think you should encounter those things. If the rules of heaven and earth dare to trouble you, aren't they looking for death? With the weak rules of the 3 elemental realm, it's not as simple as an egg hitting a rock to find trouble with 2. the life that stands at the top of the order in the 8 elemental realm. It's not as simple as an egg hitting a rock. Well, he didn't know what it was. Anyway, it was to that extent. Let's not talk about that first. In that case, if the two are really connected, are they also looking for that thing of yours? We frowned. It's unlikely, right? The girl in the cloak raised her hand and said, it's actually possible. After all, this star. This life's curiosity will always appear at inopportune times to disturb the peace of the world. She turned her head and used Yun Nuoshing's shoulder as a cushion to lean on. That thing has a very powerful energy, but normal people would definitely not be able to use it in a normal way. It would only make things worse. Now, I even suspect that the traces left all over the world are because it has been taken by someone with ulterior motives to torment it. Hui spread his hands. If they have taken it, why would there be traces left all over the place? They didn't listen to orders and ran out. The girl in the cloak shrugged. That thing is not so easy to deal with. If it completely loses control, the aura it releases at once can even sweep across the entire continent. Now that the aura it is releasing is getting more and more outrageous, I think it's not far from that time. As the girl spoke, she lowered her head and muttered, when that time comes, it will have to collapse and restart. Everything will have to start all over again. I don't want to go through so much trouble. Which bastard is it? Don't let me catch you, or else. The hall was full of resentment. Yin Nuoshing said, so in this kind of emergency, you think of some special methods? The girl in the cloak hugged her head with both hands, slowly fading into gray. He and Hui sighed, forget it. Let's use some unconventional methods. Chapter 1777. The so-called unconventional means would not be used unless absolutely necessary. Different people in different places have different standards, and setting aside how other people set the rules aside. As for them, well, the existence of the three of them was an unconventional matter. If they were placed in this ordinary world, they would be moving destruction generators, and if they were hiding, they would be void-class calamities. There was no peace of mind. Therefore, they did not plan to use that means unless it was necessary. It was all for the sake of world peace. If they were allowed to do as they pleased, this place would not be as simple as a pit. It couldn't be helped. The space, time, and void of the three elements realm were too fragile. Even if they sealed themselves, it was still very dangerous for them to casually use the power of rules. It was very dangerous for this world. After all, they were as fragile as paper. Whenever they used a little bit of their power, they had to be very careful in case they accidentally poked some parts of this world. After all, they were still affected by the after effects of the war, and it would take them hundreds of millions of years to recover. Therefore, when a young man in blue told them that he was going to use an unusual method, they were actually a bit hesitant. They hoped that the little girl could help them. If the two big things were combined into one, they only needed to find the root of it, the unidentified object. Unfortunately, the girl was not helpful. She was curled up on the sofa and tried her best to turn herself into a ball. Her body was turning gray bit by bit, and she might turn into a statue in a while. Even so, no one could feel sorry for her. It was all her own fault for being unreliable. All right, unreliable brat. Hui sighed and shook his head, throwing his gaze to Maple. Maple, do you want to do it? Yin Nuoshing tilted his head to look at him, and then at the cloak girl. Do what? Do what? Look for what? What is it like? How is its aura? What is its level of concealment? The cloak girl shuddered and moved a little to the side. Lowering her head, she mumbled in an extremely small voice. I don't know. The atmosphere in the hall suddenly became serious. Hui crossed his hands and put them in front of his nose, his face gloomy. Maple, throw this useless rag doll out. Yin Nuoshing reached out his hand, and the brat simply scurried to his side and hugged his arm. The cloaked girl looked at him as if she was about to cry. I really don't know. That evil boss randomly gave me a mission and threw me here. He didn't give me any items or support. He didn't even tell me anything. He just said, go and find them. He said that he would send reinforcements. It's been a few days, but I haven't even seen a ghost. Everyone couldn't help but turn their faces away. Her tearful voice was really pitiful. It sounded as if she was working for some black-hearted company and didn't count until she was squeezed dry. Yin Nuashing let out a long sigh. Then you have to give me some clues, even if it's just a little. A little bit. The cloaked girl thought hard for a moment and suddenly jumped up. Its aura is similar to mine. It's that kind of vague, kind of conceptual similarity. Yes, that's what I mean. Everyone in the room was stunned when they heard this. What a vague explanation. That's roughly what I mean. I can't casually say the reason. After all, it's something related to us. Although it can't be exactly the same, there should be some similarities. Yes, it's just like two ants. Zhou Zibai couldn't help but whisper. Two ants look almost the same, but if you don't look carefully, aren't they exactly the same? The cloaked girl stuck her tongue out at her. Little girl, you won't understand. Zhou Zibai pouted and looked at Yin Nuashing. Mei Mao's eyes were shining. He couldn't help but reach out and poke her head. It's very complicated. You just have to watch from his side. The little girl immediately shrank back and didn't say anything. In short, it was some kind of law and aura of energy life forms that were similar. Since there were similarities and similarities, it meant that the team behind her should be the same type as her. There were a bunch of energy life forms. Therefore, there would be similarities on a certain level. The things they created would also have similar auras in terms of concept. Thinking about it this way, Yin Nuashing reached out to the cloaked girl. The cloaked girl looked at him and hesitated for a moment. Then, she shyly put her little hand in his. Is it like this? Yin Nuashing, just give me something with your aura. Forget it, that's fine too. Hui and the little girl stood up quickly. The former waved his hand and sealed the doors and windows of the villa. He looked at Feng nervously. After thinking about it, he also strengthened the law and space of this place. Feng, take it easy. If you blow up this place, we can only sleep on the streets tonight. Will it blow up? Zhou Zibai almost jumped up. The destruction scene they caused a few days ago was deeply imprinted in her mind. If it blew up here, theoretically it shouldn't. Hui shook his head to make Zhou Zibai feel a little relieved. Then, he said fiercely, of course, in theory, things like this can happen anytime and anywhere. Zhou Zibai looked at him with dull eyes. Then, she tilted her head and looked at Yin Nuashing, who was surrounded by a colorful luster. She sat down blankly and sighed slightly. Forget it. Anyway, I'm with you guys. It seems that I won't be surprised if anything happens. Hui covered his face and smiled bitterly. I'll find a way to hold it down. The next 5 minutes made Zhou Zibai and the blue-clothed young man tremble with fear. If there was an accident, among the 7 people present, 3 of them would definitely be fine. 1 of them would give up, 2 of them wouldn't know what was going on, and only he knew the seriousness of the consequences. At this moment, cold sweat poured down from his head. He had neglected this matter. This was the fragile 3 elements world. If he let these great gods mess around here casually, he was afraid that the law and concept layer would sink together with the void. Okay. The blue-clothed young man wiped his sweat and turned his head. So fast. Let's consider it as carefully checking the situation within the safe range. Yin Nuashing nodded slightly and turned her gaze. 27,000 meters to the northeast, there's a trace left behind by it. It should be the oldest trace in this country. Hey, didn't you find the main body? The girl in the cloak listened and pursed her lips. After all, it's within the safe range. Yin Nuashing sighed helplessly. If you wanted to find the main body directly, I can do that. But I can't guarantee what will happen to this place. That thing seems to be hiding very well. The blue-clothed young man smiled bitterly. That is to say, to break the other party's concealment, I need to use more power. When the time comes, it will affect the surroundings. What kind of damage will it cause is completely unpredictable. Then let's not delay. The girl in the cloak slammed the table and stood up. She rolled up her sleeves and rushed out of the door. Hurry up and find the trouble. Oh no, hurry up and find the clues. Since it's the biggest trace, it might have been left behind from the very beginning. If there's someone there, they might know something. The group of people in the hall quickly followed. The blue-clothed young man scratched his head. This place is 27 kilometers to the northeast. I seem to have a little impression of it. That place should belong to a cultivator organization. Zhou Zibai scratched her head in confusion. Why don't I have any impression of it? It's very simple. The number of serious cultivators and cultivators with a relatively high realm is too small. The blue-clothed young man turned around and shrugged at her. Miss Zhou, although you're in Jiang City, you might not know as much as Uncle Lu and I do about some of the smaller cultivator organizations. Most of them belong to the Alliance of Cultivators, as well as some large clans and forces with inheritances. There are also some small organizations and groups that don't have many capable cultivators. 70 to 80% of the members are ordinary people who know the inside story. The rest are probably cultivators, and the ratio is about 20 to 1. Well, there are actually more small organizations like this in the world, and some of them even have a history that can be traced back. Perhaps they were once a large hidden clan or something, but they declined and became what they are today. Every year, Uncle Lu will take in those loose cultivators and small groups of wandering cultivators. But even so, there are still many of them. Some of them failed and only strengthened the management. Some of them, they don't even have the value of being taken in. The blue-clothed young man laughed dryly as he touched his chin. In order to let everyone understand this more straightforwardly, he gave a very straightforward example. Some cultivators, for various reasons, have awakened and opened up this path, but they themselves are not suitable for this path. It's the cliché of talent, and there's no ahem, there's no time and conditions to make up for this. So, most of the people who have opened up this path are only slightly stronger than ordinary people, just a little bit. I remember reading a piece of news last time. It seems that someone from a sports class in university in a certain city pinned a person to the ground and gave him a good beating. Just by looking at the story, it seemed like dozens of people were beating up a person. But in fact, that person was a cultivator. Not long after he embarked on this path, his self-confidence soared and he became arrogant. He provoked the people from the sports class and fought with them. But he didn't expect that there were a few martial artists in the class. After a few rounds of beating, he was knocked down to the ground and given a good beating. Hui thought for a moment and said, in the end, it was still a group fight, although the reason was a little different. The blue-clothed young man smiled bitterly and said, anyway, that's what it means. Not all cultivators who have just awakened and practiced for 2 days can break away from the category of ordinary people. Isn't the human realm still afraid of guns and bullets? Even a 4C realm can't withstand the deterrence of nuclear weapons. I don't know about the 2 realms above that. After all, they have disappeared. Anyway, no matter how strong he was limited to this small life star. He was used to the situation of fighting in the 8 elements realm. Now that he was reliving it again, he had a different feeling. At the top of the skyscraper, there was a huge room. Except for the walls leading to the inside, which were made of tough, light materials, the other 3 walls were made of dark glass. This was the highest point of Jiang City. Standing by the window and looking into the distance, he could see more than half of Jiang City. He liked the feeling of overlooking everything in the world. So, before you go into self-indulgent mode, can you tell me when you're going to reimburse my car? On the sofa in a room sat a young man in his 20s or 30s in casual clothes. His coat was open casually. He looked depressed and impatient, crossing his legs and supporting his chin with his right hand, and said, "Your bad taste hasn't changed after several years. Don't you feel dizzy looking down from such a high place?" "Don't say that, friend." The young man standing by the window had a swept-back hairstyle, black-rimmed glasses, a suit, and a branded watch. From his clothes to his accessories, none of them were simple items. He was full of the aura of a successful person and said, "It's just a small failure. Don't be so irritable. Even if it fails, it's not a problem. Anyway, we just need to make sure that as few people know about it as possible. Even if they do know about it, well, let them know about it. There are also a small number of people in the Alliance of Cultivators who know about it. We just need to make sure that they don't know what it is." But, Sutai, Are you sure you weren't joking with me last time? The young man in casual clothes named Su Tai instantly stood up angrily and said, I'm joking with you. A joke. Don't tell me you don't know what material my car is made of. It's custom made with an alloy that's 10 years ahead of the world's technology. It's just a matter of changing 2 tires if it takes a direct hit from a missile. As he spoke, he suddenly threw a piece of charred debris on the table and said, Take a look for yourself. Take a good look at it. Mother of asterisk Kerr, that person is like a ghost. He stood in the middle of the road and took a direct hit from 470 kilometers per hour, but nothing happened to him. On the contrary, I almost spiraled into the sky, and my beloved car really did fly into the sky. At that moment, I thought I hit a meteor head-on. If it weren't for them showing mercy, I would have already flown into the sky along with 1/3, January 3rd, and January 3rd. The young man in glasses picked up the twisted piece of metal, raised his eyes and glanced at the irritable Su Tai, and said, Maybe he's a cultivator? Nonsense. Do you think an ordinary person could do that? Moreover, he has to be at least at the Earth realm. Su Tai fiercely exhaled and sat down on the sofa, waving his hands vigorously. In any case, I'm scared. I can't handle this. If you're interested in them, then find someone else. So, will my car be reimbursed? There's no rush. I'll give you a better car after a while. For now, the door suddenly opened with a bang, and a man in a suit who seemed to be a bodyguard rushed into the room, causing the two of them to stop talking and look over. Boss, bad news. A group of people rushed in and went straight to the basement. The young man and Su Tai were both startled. The former unhurriedly adjusted the screen of the computer, projecting a huge image in the space in front of them. Su Tai glanced at the image and was so frightened that he almost jumped out of the window. Holy shit, why is it them? Of the 7 people in the image, 4 of them were the 4 people he met by the river. At this moment, they were driving the Peerless through the spacious basement corridor. None of the bodyguards and security guards who rushed up to them could get within a meter of them. They were all sent flying by an unknown force, crashing into the wall, hanging on the ceiling, and fainting. Those are the people you were talking about. The young man in glasses frowned. This is troublesome. There's residual energy released by the divine artifact in the basement. From the looks of it, they seem to know something and can accurately sense it. Even if it's covered by thousands of tons of concrete, there's no way to completely block the energy of the divine artifact. They actually managed to find this place. Huh, you still have that thing? Su Tai suddenly rushed to the front of the table and slammed the table as he shouted at the youth. That energy will kill you all. Didn't I tell you not to keep it by your side? Why did you still put it in the basement? Of course, it's valuable. The young man glanced at him and waved his hand. Let's go, friend. We'll go down and meet them. I'm not doing it. Su Tai's expression suddenly changed. He kept retreating and shaking his head. His face was full of fear. If you want to die, go by yourself. I'll never go. I won't go. I won't go even if you beat me to death. Car. 10 seconds later, in the private elevator, Su Tai squatted in the corner of the elevator with a gloomy face. He and the young man in glasses followed the elevator to the basement quickly. He stared at the number on the screen and kept muttering in his heart. I still feel a little regretful. It's better to find a chance to escape. Su Tai thought. In the basement, Yin Nuoxing and the others were walking quickly in the passage made of silver metal. Their footsteps fell on the floor with crisp, clanking sounds. Behind them was a large group of people lying on the ground, hugging their arms, necks, or stomachs as they wailed. The girl with the ponytail seemed to have never seen such a scene. She looked at the large group of people lying behind her and pulled the young man in blue worriedly. Aren't we here to look for something? Yes, the thing is inside. It's definitely not easy to talk about it, and there's no need to talk. The young man in blue nodded. Her face was blank. So they didn't plan to talk from the beginning and just directly barged in. The entire basement was like a huge underground space. The silver metal divided the space into many sections. There were forks, but there weren't many, so it didn't feel like a maze. The overall size and scale of the place were about the same, and Yin Nuoxing had already explored it. A straight road leads to the innermost area. The left and right intersections lead to other sections. It's not as complicated as you think. The light in the underground passage seemed to be coming from the ceiling. The two sides of the 3 to 4 meter wide passage seemed to be divided into spaces. There were empty rooms inside, about 10 meters in length and width. They were separated from the passage by a thin layer of space. The entrance should be at the other section at the end of the forks. They could only observe from here. However, these spaces were empty. The things left behind told them what the original purpose of this place was. They didn't know if the plan was canceled or it was not time to carry it out yet. This futuristic feeling is a little strange. Zhou Zibai couldn't help but say, "It's a bit like what we saw on the island in the secret realm last time. They used some special materials." Although we didn't know what the futuristic feeling was, he could distinguish a lot of things just by feeling. These metals are good at shielding energy. The entire huge underground space is made of these things. They've hidden something underground. If I'm not mistaken, he turned his head to look at the girl in the cloak. The latter immediately grimaced and rolled up her sleeves. They must have hidden its energy here. But why is there no one here? She looked at the space on both sides of the passage and pouted unhappily. I haven't beaten enough yet. Yes, those people flying around, hanging on the ceiling and embedded in the walls were not done by Yin Nuoxing and the others. It was this girl who did it. The strange power scared Zhou Zibai and the other girl with a ponytail. Yin Nuoxing looked up. The life force is behind us. There are no more guards here. The road ahead is unimpeded. TSK, this is not fun. Hui smiled bitterly. They said that they came for the energy traces left behind by that something. Why did they start beating people up? This girl was really not serious. Yin Nuoxing was suddenly startled. Someone is coming. But there are only 2 people in the room. Oh, it's the leader. The blue-clothed youth nodded in realization. Full of motivation, he quickened his pace and said, "Let's hurry up and kill them. Let's loot their equipment. Kill them. Kill them until their levels reach 0. Yin Nuoxing and the others were confused. What was this guy talking about? In the deepest part of the underground space, there was a huge hexagonal door in front of them. Judging from the joints and gaps, it should be open from 6 directions. Clang. The girl in the cloak punched a big hole in the door. She clapped her hands and put her hands on her hips. Break through directly. Why open the door? You'll be punished by the heavens if you touch our stuff without permission. The huge space behind the door was the same as the cages they saw on both sides of the passage, but it was bigger. Also, when they looked up, they could see a dense, dark aura hanging in the air like a thick cumulonimbus cloud. Welcome, uninvited guests. The voice from the depths drew the attention of Yin Nuoxing and the others. They turned around and saw a young man with slicked-back hair and an impatient young man with his hands in his pockets. His emotions were written all over his face. Why am I here? Why didn't I escape in the first place? And I'm a little regretful. The blue-clothed youth walked forward with one hand on his hip. He pointed at the 2 people opposite him with his chin up. Cut the crap. If you want to transform, do it now. If you don't, we'll rush in. The 2 people opposite him were startled. The girl in the cloak was a little worried. No, it's not like that. If you transform with that thing, you'll be miserable. Even your soul may be crushed. TSK, the mastermind likes this trick. If you don't give them some time to transform, how can they get better equipment and materials? Yin Nuoxing felt dizzy and covered her face. What has this guy been talking about since the beginning? Chapter 1778. To be able to reach this place, it means that you have considerable strength. Unfortunately, you put your strength in unnecessary places and came here to die. You're really impatient. The young man wearing black-rimmed glasses suddenly laughed. As he took a step forward, a transparent glass-like barrier suddenly rose from the floor in front of Yin Nuoxing and the others. It went straight to the ceiling, separating them from the other 2 in 2 spaces. The cloaked girl rolled up her sleeves and was about to rush forward, but Yin Nuoxing grabbed her by the back of her collar and moved her to the side. You're very calm. Do you think you have victory in your hands? Hui shrugged his shoulders and walked forward. He stretched out his hand and pressed on the transparent glass in front of him. He gave it a gentle push, but it didn't move at all. There were even energy patterns on the glass. If he wasn't mistaken, these should be Tao marks. Moreover, many of them had relatively complete rule power and were ancient Tao marks. He didn't know how many ancient Tao marks were used to make this thing so sturdy. It was no wonder that the two opposite were so calm. They were determined that no one could break this thing. Useless. The young man put his hands in his pockets and couldn't help but laugh. This kind of Tao mark used to strengthen defense is a relic left behind from ancient times. It can absorb the attacker's power and use it for defense, unless the attack you send out can exceed your own power. We've played this kind of little trick countless years ago. Hui shrugged again. He used a little bit of rule power and poked the center of the transparent glass with one finger. Suddenly, the entire glass cast barrier burst apart like an exploding pile of snow. It broke apart into thousands of pieces and fell down like snowflakes. Well, it's just a special way of operating energy. Hui laughed indifferently. Rule power can give many characteristics, but as long as it exists in the described state, it can be destroyed. It's just a matter of using a little more rule power. He didn't even need to use his brain. His rule power was stronger than the rule power contained in the barrier. He could easily destroy this so-called characteristic. That's a little surprising. When Yin Nuoxing and the others continued to move forward, the young man laughed unhurriedly and opened his hands to them. Many of the forces stationed here have this kind of power. It seems that you didn't rely on luck to get here. Of course. Yin Nuoxing nodded. My luck is usually pretty bad, so I'll crush anything that plays with luck. There's no such thing as betting on luck. Everyone, no, that guy obviously didn't mean that. You don't have to answer so seriously. Bang! A thick and heavy wall, which was still made of transparent glass, fell from the sky and landed heavily in front of Yin Nuoxing and the others, blocking their path once again. This time, countless Tao marks appeared on the glass before anyone could attack it. They were so densely packed that everyone was stunned. So many ancient Tao marks. Zhou Zibai was stunned. A magic weapon with a thumb-sized ancient Taoist mark was already a rare treasure, but this wall was engraved with it. This looked really exaggerated. He really liked building tortoise shells, but defense alone was not enough to win. Only attack and destruction were the true truths of the void. With this broken wall, it could be... Wait a minute, the wall didn't seem big this time? The cloaked girl was slightly stunned. She seemed to have thought of something and suddenly rushed out. She punched the glass wall directly. The powerful punch made the underground space tremble, as shockwave visible to the naked eye spread along the wall. However, this punch, which was enough to break mountains and split rocks, did not shatter the layer of glass. Even if they sensed the power of law in this punch, it was still the same. TSK, this is troublesome. I hate this thing the most, but how can there be something of this scale in this place? The cloaked girl took 2 steps back angrily and shook her white little hand. Yin Nuoxing walked forward and touched it. Then he let out a long "oh" and said to Hui and the little girl in their souls, "It's something that's bound and locked with chains of rules. The rules of this thing bind all the rules within a radius of a few thousand miles together. Its defensive power is equivalent to the sturdiness of this area. Moreover, if it's destroyed rashly, it will blow up the entire area." The blue-clothed young man seemed to have discovered something as well. He scratched his head with a headache. A complete ancient Tao mark, or even more ancient and powerful, so that it has the same defensive power as this world. Yin Nuoxing clenched his fists and looked at the barrier. It's just a simple and crude barrier. Do you think I would care about these few thousand miles? At most, I will slowly restore it after this. Look at my slap. Zhou Zibai pulled him back with all her strength and smiled bitterly. Don't you still have to care? We looked at Foam being pushed back and smiled bitterly. He transmitted his voice to the blue-clothed young man. I have never heard of the so-called ancient powerhouses in this place having this kind of ability. No, I'm not too sure. The blue-clothed youth replied with a bitter smile. Logically speaking, this level of complete nomological power should be something that only those in the upper and middle realms can barely control. The powerhouses of ancient times that I know of shouldn't have reached this level. Probably. However, if it's a powerhouse from a higher era than the ancient times, maybe the blue-clothed young man smiled bitterly. But that place has completely disappeared. It really can't be found at all. We can only speculate from the clues that such an era once existed. As for what it was like, no one can say clearly. Then, we scratched his head and frowned. Well, this is still a magical world. It seems that there are still some mysteries. He shook his head and shouted to the young man, "You don't think that you can rest easy with this thing, do you? It's just a broken shield. It can be broken with a little time. You still can escape your fate. Although it's a little troublesome to deal with it, we won't compromise because of this. Cutting off its connection with this area and destroying it, although it's a little troublesome, it's nothing more than that." The cloaked girl narrowed her eyes and said in a cold voice, "If you want to escape, this will be your last chance. Turn around and run, brat. Just run away in a sorry state. When the door is opened, I won't be so patient." Yun Nuashing expressed that he wanted to punch it, but he was jointly pressed down by Hui and Zhou Zibai. He felt good punching it, but this place was also good. Thousands of miles, it was estimated that this place was the size of several provinces. Who knew how many lives were in it? Yes, they did have a way to get rid of this thing without using pure violence. However, that little bit of movement was estimated to not be less than that of a violent demolition. After all, it was a confrontation with the power of the rules of this world. No matter how gentle it would still cause a little bit of damage. Although they could keep the door intact by breaking in, the lock would definitely be destroyed. Occasionally, if they failed to break in, the door might also be removed. The young man on the opposite side didn't panic at all when he heard this. He waved his finger unhurriedly. Escape? No, you think too much. On the contrary, if you leave now, I can still let you go. What if I say I don't want to leave? He crossed his arms. He was very curious about what the other party's trump card was. In short, it was definitely not this shield. Attack and destruction were the truth of this void. Since there was a shield, the other party must have prepared a corresponding spear. In this place, the only thing he could think of was the gloomy cumulonimbus cloud above his head. If you don't, the young man smiled faintly and took a step back. On the flat silver-white ground, a square glass pillar suddenly rose. It was engraved with ancient Tao marks and extended towards the cloud above. Then please take a look at our new power. There were probably more Tao marks engraved on the glass pillar than on the wall. There were 3 layers of Tao marks on the inside and 3 layers of Tao marks on the outside. The entire transparent pillar was almost dyed in a different color. Even though there was a thick barrier between them, they could still feel the powerful energy contained in that thing. It's a pity that I can't fully control this power. If I use it slightly, it will cause me to lose control. The young man touched the pillar with his hand and said unhurriedly. It was as if he was talking to Yin Nuashing and the others, but it was more like he was talking to himself. It's really a power that makes people sigh. Originally, I planned to use 5 years to better control it, but you uninvited guests appeared out of nowhere and completely ruined my plan. Now is not the best time, but there is no way to take more into consideration. The glass pillar engraved with ancient Tao marks had reached into the cumulonimbus cloud. The dark energy began to boil as if it was stimulated by something. The clouds rolled, and a huge energy that contained countless negative information was crazily shaking in the hall. Just the waves that swept through the hall made Zhou Zibai and the others look slightly gloomy. Do you want to think about it again? The cloaked girl gritted her teeth and walked forward. She leaned against the glass wall and whispered to the young man. Her tone was a little softer. This thing is really not fun. It's really miserable to use this thing. Let's discuss it. If you cooperate with us honestly, we won't do anything to you, okay? I'm afraid it's too late to realize it now. The young man laughed loudly. His hands that were pressed against the glass pillar were constantly flickering with gold and gray light. There was energy surging, as if it was connected to the dark energy. The surging energy was surging along the pillar, bringing with it an irresistible heavenly might that descended from the sky. It made Su Tai's heart palpitate, and he hurriedly took a few steps back. Look, This is the power of creation. This is the ultimate existence in this world. This is the power of God. The young man laughed loudly. The dark energy had already poured into his body along the pillar. The unprecedented power made him laugh even more unscrupulously. Power, the supreme power, this is the power of a true God. You can't imagine how powerful this power is. I am a God that has descended to this world. Yes, I feel it. You can't stop it. What's with your expressions? The young man only heard his own passionate speech and didn't hear anything else. When he turned his head, he saw the strange actions of Yin Nuoxing and the others. The blue-clothed young man was covering the eyes of his cohabitant. Yin Nuoxing, in turn, covered Zhou Zhibai's eyes and then dragged her back a step. She and the others looked at him expressionlessly, and their faces were full of pity and regret. I'm afraid that this kid's brain is completely fried. Several people sighed in their hearts in unison. Oh, it's nothing. Continue, don't stop. The cloaked girl waved her hand and then shrank back in Yin Nuoxing's hands. She stretched out her hand and carefully poked her head out. We're looking forward to it. You come closer. Come closer. Don't worry, we won't beat you. We shouted at Su Tai through the glass wall. Su Tai trembled as he looked at the young man. That mighty energy made his heart tremble. He couldn't help but want to kneel down. When he heard Huey's voice, he also trembled and moved to the wall. He held his head and squatted down. The young man's stunned expression lasted for a while. After a moment, it turned into disdain and anger. Pretending to be mysterious. You're just a group of ignorant scoundrels. Just you wait. You'll regret it. I'll make you beg for death. The vibrating dark energy suddenly expanded violently. Then, an excessively violent and abnormal movement came from inside. Some kind of huge energy collapsed inside and pulled out a few energy thunderbolts. In an instant, it spread through the entire cloud layer. The violent and restless appearance made the young man stunned. An even more indescribable energy surged into his body through the pillar, causing his body to expand 3 to 4 times its original size in 2 seconds. His clothes were torn apart, and even his glasses were blown apart. An endless negative energy was running amok in his body. It was completely uncontrollable, causing his eyes to become as red as blood. The space around his body was already distorted, as if there was a pair of hands squeezing him together with the space around him. The energy can't stop. The young man looked at the people who had become small and saw himself expanding into a giant. The veins on his body were bulging, and dark energy was constantly gushing out of his open pores. The abnormal energy had not stopped surging into his body. The anger and ecstasy on his face instantly turned into fear. Stop! No, this power, don't. Yin Nuoxing pressed hard on Zhou Zhibai's eyes and ears. A moment later, a thunder-like explosion was heard after a few seconds of delay. Flesh and blood were all over the 4 walls. Su Tai, who was shrinking under the glass wall, also screamed. He was covered with a mass of rotten flesh and sticky gray blood. The glass wall behind him was imprinted with his shadow. Smelly, it stinks to death. Su Tai screamed. We expressed deep sympathy that this child would have nightmares in the future. The dark energy was strengthened by more than 4 to 5 times in an instant. It raged and spread throughout the entire space. The glass wall also retracted into the ground with the disappearance of the controller, releasing the dark energy towards the entire underground space. However, when they had just poked their heads out for a distance, a pair of white little hands propped up a golden energy barrier and blocked them all. I told you not to do it. Don't do it, but you didn't listen. Now it's so disgusting. How do you want me, a girl, to do it? The dark energy was mixed with the flesh and blood of the young man, and it was dyed with a little scarlet, which made it even more disgusting and evil. The cloaked girl wanted to vomit when she saw it. When she thought of using her cute hands to beat it up, she vomited. It really blew up. Hui murmured expressionlessly. He sighed and shook his head. How many times have I told you not to play with power that you can't control? Seeing his shrewd appearance, I thought he would be able to play with this thing. But in the end, the face of the blue-clothed young man twitched. In the end, he still took the risk out of desperation. He didn't even have time to transform before it blew up. Now, all his equipment is blown up. Zhou Zibai looked at the bloody wall. There were some pieces of rotten flesh on the wall that kept sliding down, which made this horrifying scene a few levels higher. She glanced at it and sniffed the bloody smell that filled the space. She rolled her eyes and quickly grabbed Yin Nuoxing's hand and pressed it on her eyes. She covered her nose with both hands. "Lend me." Yin Nuoxing curled her lips. Well, even a strong girl like this can't stand this kind of disgusting scene. Looking at her nose that seems to have been smelled and she wanted to hold her breath, I feel a little sympathetic. This scene is purely disgusting. Although they can accept it, they still don't like to see it. 90% of people who come in and take a look would probably go out and find a trash can of vomit. The cloaked girl resisted the nausea and used 5 minutes to deal with the dark energy. When the last wisp of energy was removed, she breathed a sigh of relief. Looking at her hands that were dyed scarlet, she sucked in a cold breath and rubbed her hands fiercely. A burst of fluorescent light flashed, and it returned to normal. Then, she lowered her head and sniffed. With a look of disgust, she said, "Corrosion. Corrosion. It's gonna rot. Forget it. Business is more important." She muttered and shook her hands, but she still couldn't resist the disgust in her heart. She quickly raised her right hand, and a burst of golden light burst out from her palm and swept across the entire hall. "A cough cough. Reverse. Resurrect, lost brat. Let me give you a chance to repent." The flashing golden light caused the flesh and blood in the hall to gather together. With a flash of golden light, the figure of the bespectacled young man was formed again. He fell to the ground and screamed. He seemed to be completely fine, and even his eyes and clothes were restored to their original state. How is this possible? How is this possible? I'm dead. This is an illusion. The young man looked at the ceiling in a daze. His eyes were dull, and he kept repeating these words. Everyone came forward to look, and they all said that he might be on the verge of collapse. Resurrection. Zhou Zibai reached out and pinched her face. She frowned in pain. "It hurts. It's not a dream." However, it felt like a dream. "Get up. Collapse your head." After making a big fuss and having fun, "You want to run away? It doesn't exist." The cloaked girl pulled him up and gave him 2 slaps on his face. She snorted softly and said, "Why don't you dream about something more realistic? God's power? This **T thing can only turn you into a retard, just like how you are now." "No, but that's the power of God. That's the supreme power of God." "Why?" The young man's eyes were still dull, as if he hadn't woken up from a dream. "Why are you talking about God? Please don't talk about this word whenever you encounter something." Yin Nuoxing turned her head and said lightly, "You don't even know what God is. You don't know whether God is an illusory concept or a real thing to you. When you encounter a powerful force, you say, 'Ah, this is the power that God gave me.' Are you sure that it's not a disaster that God gave you? In the end, no matter what kind of power you obtain, you're just seeking your own death because you don't understand this seemingly unimportant concept." The cloaked girl looked back at him and said with a little surprise, "Oh, you know quite well." The young man's confused and dull expression suddenly became a little ferocious. "No, it shouldn't be like this. Yes, it shouldn't be like this. It's all you guys who ruined everything. If only I had enough time, I would have." We rushed up and kicked the young man to the wall. Looking at the young man who fell to the ground and fainted, Hui rolled his eyes. "You're so annoying. Can't you be more straightforward, like a human? Babbling, 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 are you retarded?" The cloaked girl looked at him blankly. "You knocked him out. Who am I supposed to ask?" "Well, you can't ask a normal question with him like that anyway." "Oh, that's true. But there's someone here." Yin Nuoxing walked over from the side and grabbed Su Tai, who was huddled by the wall and had just recovered. She threw him on the ground. "He might know something." Su Tai looked up at the people who surrounded him with fierce expressions. His face twitched, and wrinkled like a bitter gourd. I told you we couldn't do it. We couldn't do it, but we had to come down and do it. This servant is going to lose his life. After handing the person over to the cloak girl to deal with, Yin Nuoxing and the other two came to the side of the glass pillar. After experiencing a shocking explosion of energy, the pillar did not even have a scratch on it. It was just that the ancient Tao marks were a little darker. It looks like a lightning rod. We reached out and poked the pillar a few times. There are many complete rules in it. This is the best semi-rule creation we've seen since we came here. Well, it can twist an existing object into the appearance of a rule creation. However, it's still very crude, simple and crude. It just absorbs energy, and there's no way to control it all. This thing is the kind of thing that just builds a bridge, doesn't care about people coming and going on the bridge, and doesn't care about whether there's a flood under the bridge. So I made him explode. Zhou Zibai leaned over and listened to this and whispered, "But what's the matter with the power of the gods he mentioned? That brainless guy thinks that the strong power he encountered is the mark left behind by the gods." He spread his hands and said bluntly, if he had to say, the dark aura was a little related to the chaos of the void. The power of the rules was very weak, but it was strong enough for mortals. It was not wrong to say that it was a god. However, as Maple said just now, they were not sure whether the gods were an illusory concept or a real thing to them. How could they talk about gods? In the end, it was just a delusion. Only they could say this. After all, they knew very well that the so-called life of a god was bitter. Just like themselves, a large group of origins and primeval heavenly gods were placed in the front line of the void to fight endless battles. They were busy all over the void. It was a life of hard work. Ah, so troublesome. The cloak girl left Su Tai and walked over. She crossed her arms and said to Yin Nuoxing and the others, "It's involved in other things again. It's so troublesome. What if I don't want to do it?" Yin Nuoxing glanced at her and said, "Bonuses and props." The cloaked girl's pretty face twitched, and her face was full of bitterness. "Okay, then I'll work harder." Chapter 1779. Sometimes, going out on a mission is like grabbing a ball of yarn. Even if you only grab a single thread, the more you pull, the messier it becomes. Perhaps it won't end until you pull it to the end. The cloaked girl sighed gloomily at the sky. Her eyes were filled with distracting thoughts. She reached out her hand and pressed on the glass pillar that was used to guide the dark presence. She sighed gloomily. This pillar. It used a little of that thing's energy. No wonder it could guide this residue. Logically speaking, even if it was placed right in front of you, it would only affect you. No one would have the right to mess with it. That thing probably didn't just appear here and circle around. It should have been touched by you people, right? The cloaked girl kicked Su Tai, who was kneeling on the ground, uneasily. She spoke in a dissatisfied tone. "You really are a nuisance. Every move you make will bring you destruction. You lost brats. Hurry up and tell me. What did you do to that thing?" Su Tai shook his head vigorously with his face full of sweat. His sweat was all over the floor. He pointed at the young man who was still paralyzed on the ground. "That thing has always been under his charge. I only know that he kept mumbling about something like divine artifact and divine artifact's energy. Just like what he said just now. I don't know the specifics. I was also assigned to monitor outside to see if anyone noticed that energy. If necessary, I was to eliminate anyone who noticed it so that no one could find us through that energy." What else do you know other than that? Explain everything clearly to me. There's another thing. That's right. The divine artifact he mentioned was not brought back by anyone. It suddenly appeared in this basement that was originally set aside for other purposes. We couldn't move it, so we could only modify this space. However, it shouldn't have been here for too long. It might have only been here for a week before it disappeared. Other than that, I don't know anything else. The cloaked girl squinted her eyes. Her pale silver eyes had a weak energy flowing around them. She looked at Su Tai for a moment, and then reluctantly dispersed her energy. "All right, you're honest." The moment the energy dissipated, Su Tai also felt his body become twice as light. He couldn't help but smile bitterly. He didn't plan to hide anything. In front of this group of people who looked like humans, but were beyond his understanding. If he hid anything, he wouldn't even know how he died. Anyway, he was scared. Seeing that guy who had said several times that he couldn't deal with him play himself to death and be revived, he decided that he couldn't disobey this group of people no matter what. If he could survive today, he would go back to the countryside and build a shabby house to spend his old age in advance. She turned around and poked the pillar, saying, "Does anyone else know of its existence? Except for those people you just mentioned. It should be gone?" Sutai wiped the sweat off his chin. "Probably. The other trouble you mentioned just now, is it related to other people?" Yin Nuashing frowned. "I was mentally prepared, but I didn't want things to develop in this direction even if I was beaten to death." The girl lowered her head and tugged at her cloak. She sighed in distress. This matter was just like what she said just now. She dragged it deeper and deeper. It said that on the day the divine weapon ran out by itself, someone else happened to break in. However, they were a step too late and missed. What happened after that? I know what happened after that. A group of people chased after the divine weapon all over the world, causing a series of disasters. The blue-clothed youth suddenly realized something and snapped his fingers. So the thing that they chased after for more than a year was the divine weapon that you guys were talking about. Everyone. We pushed Feng to the side and quickly went forward. "No. How did you connect the dots?" The blue-clothed youth pointed at this place. "Of course, it's because the people who broke in last time were Uncle Lu's people. When I went to the Alliance to look for Uncle Lu, I saw a photo of this place. I was wondering why it felt so familiar. So it's because I've seen it before and thought that I was in a trance." Sutai. "So it's the people from the Alliance of Cultivators. Then, no wonder. All right, then we're back to square one," we said to the girl in the cloak. "We probably don't have to worry about the people from the Alliance. Let them go back and let them know. They should be very willing to cooperate with us." The girl scratched her head. What's going on?" We simply repeated what the blue-clothed youth said to him. After listening to him, she let out a long, "Oh, I see. That thing itself has a certain degree of energy. When it was moving through space, the energy might have leaked out. That's why it's like this." She fell silent as she spoke. She looked troubled and conflicted. "It's so troublesome. If that's the case, I still have to deal with the aftermath. If the higher-ups find out, they'll definitely deduct my bonus. No, that won't do. I can't be blamed for this. It's been more than a year, and I haven't come yet. It's all because of the time difference. Even if the higher-ups find out, they won't be able to do anything to me. Yes, it's not my fault. I don't know. Everyone, she's really good at pushing the blame. It's fine as long as we solve this perfectly. Now is the time. Now is the time." The girl waved her hand and walked to the side. She grabbed Sutai and asked him all sorts of questions. She couldn't wait to ask him what kind of underwear he was wearing that day. The young man in blue suddenly took out his phone and walked to the side while pressing the button. "Oh, I have to tell Uncle Lu and the others quickly, lest they encounter it in such a short time. If that happens, it will be a big deal. They can't handle this kind of thing." After knowing that the people involved could be considered as people on their side, everyone felt more at ease. At least, they didn't have to suddenly kill their way into other people's territory or forcefully break into people's houses. However, the situation still hadn't changed. They still didn't know where that damned divine weapon had gone. Feng raised the level of the outside of the specifications a little more. Hui looked forward and reached out to pull Feng, who was standing behind him. Yin Nuashing removed the entire glass pillar with a click. She glanced at him and calmly stroked her long hair. She gently placed the pillar on the ground. The sensing of the rules last time was already close to the limit that this place can withstand. If I were to raise it a little more. She took a deep breath and said faintly, "I really don't know what will happen." Playing disco in the concept level of the rules had an impact on the real world. From the smallest area having abnormal rules, such as the sudden disappearance of light, to the largest area directly destroying the entire planet. These were all uncertain things. There was no reason for them to not have any grievances with each other. It wasn't worth it to drag the entire place into the void, right? There's no other way. I have to use some special methods on my side. The cloaked girl sighed softly. She finally let go of Sutai, who had already finished speaking and could only stammer. She walked towards Yin Nuashing and the others. I'll leave for a while and do something else. I'll see if I can get any special information. Hui looked at her body that was beginning to glow with a faint golden light. He couldn't help but say, "Don't waste half a day and lose yourself." The girl who was in the middle of being teleported staggered and almost fell out. "I'm not that confused." Her voice was cut off. The teleportation took her to an unknown place. There seemed to be a weak power of the rules flickering for a moment. Uncle Lu's side has been clearly explained. He said that he will cooperate with us. The blue-clothed youth tidied up his clothes and walked back. After hearing about the danger of this matter, he also planned to cancel the other missions first and prioritize solving this strange divine artifact before it causes more harm. But even so, there are no clues now. According to Uncle Lu, the latest trace that was found should be the one that was found 5 days ago. It's located at the South Pole. Well, there's nothing else. The blue-clothed youth said as he spread out his hands. He glanced at the broken glass pillar and then looked at everyone who seemed to be fine. He opened his mouth and said, "Then let's leave first." "Oh, if there's nothing else, let's leave." Hui nodded. He took 2 steps and went back the way he came. He pointed at Su Tai and the young man who was still lying on the ground and muttering, "What about these 2 people? I asked Uncle Lu to deal with it. We don't have to worry about this side." Divine artifact, this thing was not special in Huey's understanding and cognition. It was just that the things at the beginning of the God level were called divine artifacts. They preferred to call them God level products. Then they classified most of the things at the later God level as the creation of rules. It was too ambiguous to simply call it a divine artifact. They liked to divide it, but they also knew that in this mortal world, divine artifact represented the word of absolute power. First, it was just like how mortals always like to talk about gods and fantasize about the so-called gods. They always felt that the gods would leave behind a lot of things, so they regarded them as divine artifacts. Let's not talk about whether those were divine weapons or divine items. He had no idea what the gods in this mortal world were talking about. How was he supposed to categorize them? Mere mortals. Couldn't they be more unified? Well, he was just shouting. He didn't mean anything else. If there really was a divine artifact left behind by the gods, he felt that it might be a daily item. Don't ask why. If you asked, the answer would be the tea set of the heavenly god of origin. In this case, the things left behind by the gods might be just rubbish left in the world. The existence of the divine artifact was known to Lu Weiran through the blue-clothed young man. It also made the entire alliance of cultivators operate at high speed. They were too lazy to ask about the specific situation. They just wanted to wait for the results. In this situation, where everything was restricted, they could only wait in a villa, like a salted fish. It was really too enjoyable. Oh no, it was really too sullen. He still wanted to solve this mess as soon as possible and then go to the Pacific Ocean for a few rounds. It's just that it may be difficult to get results in a short time. The blue-clothed young man held his chin and sighed. The new news seems to say that there are many people like us abroad who know about this thing. It's probably because of the movement caused by it. These are the results of the investigation. Once it involves the whole world, a lot of information will be collected. Uncle Lu asked me specifically how much damage it will cause. How should I respond? We thought for a while and said, it's the extent of 100 mortal immortals risking their lives to strike. Or you can say that if the divine artifact explodes in the South Pole, it will open a hole in the North Pole. 7 to 8 billion people will spiral into the sky. The blue-clothed young man and Zhou Jibai, the truth in his words was half true and half threatening. It was hard to say whether it was a threat or not. Based on the current situation, if it could leave such a dark aura that could harm mortals by 70 to 80 stars in the world, its true form must be even more ridiculous. Even if such an unknown thing suddenly exploded with a bang, it would be completely impossible to cause any impact to them. At most, it would be a gorgeous firework passing through, and they would watch the dust gather and scatter. Yellow sand filled the sky. It would be a scene of desolation and endless desolation. The sea turned to dust, and the world was only left with a bloody sunset. The three of them sat in the ruins, looking at each other in silence. Or the four of them? Perhaps it was because the level of the thing they were dealing with was not particularly high, so they were a little listless. He finally knew why Maple usually squinted his eyes and looked like he could fall asleep anytime and anywhere. Although he felt that the observer was just used to being lazy when he had nothing to do, at this moment, other than communicating with Jing Yuanji for a minute or two every day, there was probably nothing that could make him a little spirited. The interest of the cloaked girl in that aspect had been proven to be a short-lived passion. The blue-clothed young man was also helping to sort out the information from Lu Weiran. The three of them were responsible for slacking, and being bystanders. After all, this matter was related to the local area, so they could handle it themselves. The people of this life, Star had caused trouble, so they had to clean it up themselves. If they could not clean it up, then they would take their time to appear. Moreover, this was the work they had been doing for more than a year. They could only be regarded as outsiders. Friendship was friendship, and helping was another matter. If they were really given full authority to solve this matter, there would probably be other people in the Alliance who would be unhappy. Speaking of which, someone in the Alliance of Cultivators seems to have mentioned you guys. The blue-clothed young man suddenly threw down a pile of things and looked up at Yin Nuoxing and the others. Uncle Lu said that it was a steward of another district and someone of similar status as him. You guys have thrown too much information into the Alliance. For example, the matter of the hidden realm last time and the matter of the divine artifact this time, there's been no progress for more than a year. But you guys have just squeezed in for a while, and you have already made a lot of progress. You even captured 2 captives who had come in contact with the divine artifact. These things can't be stopped, and many people have become very curious. Let them be curious. It's fine as long as they don't disturb us. We leaned lazily on the sofa. They didn't plan to be secretive about their actions. If they had the time, they might as well deal with it directly and use more time to slack off. As long as they didn't have a what in their brain, they would be able to sense the abnormal aura overflowing from their unscrupulous actions. That Uncle Lu was the first person in the Alliance to come into contact with them. He only knew a part of it and didn't go overboard. It was fine as long as he knew that they weren't enemies and didn't make any rash movements. He also didn't intend to investigate their real situation. However, since he was the person responsible for the country, the investigation of the case would definitely. No. Well, Uncle Lu wouldn't, because he knew very well that he wouldn't be able to find out anything. The same couldn't be said for the others. But even if they found out that he had a cerebral hemorrhage, they wouldn't be able to find out anything. As long as it wasn't in their faces, they would treat it as if nothing had happened. He still wanted to slack off peacefully. If he was a few days late, there might not be any more fish to slack off. Phone! Let's go. Let's go play. Turning his thoughts into motivation, Hui slapped the table and stood up. Without saying a word, he grabbed phone and rushed out. Perhaps his reaction was very fast, but it was probably just a matter of convenience. Zhou Zibai was sitting next to him, so he grabbed the girl along with him. The three of them whizzed out with a scream. The little girl followed behind unhurriedly, leaving the blue-clothed young man and his ponytailed girl staring at each other in a daze. It had been 5 or 6 eras since he really rested. Counting the next few eras, he probably would not have much time to rest. At this moment, he had a rare free time. In order to make up for the wonderful lifetime occupied by the War of Order that started 10 eras back to back, we had steeled his heart to slack off in this mortal world until he was satisfied. Well, Oshing was not worried that this guy would be so happy that he would forget about home, but, he still felt a little guilty. He had to make it clear that it was not a sense of guilt towards the front line of the void. After all, Jing Yuanji had told him to rest every day. No matter how nervous he was, he could let it go a little. The guilt he was talking about was the guilt of being forced to wander around the world as the first thing he did in the void. Wherever he went, there would be trouble. He really hoped that nothing would happen at this time. The passive of this talent was to bring disaster to the neighbors. They could even pull down the void, let alone an ordinary world. In short, he liked this kind of relatively quiet and peaceful atmosphere, but he could not lift his spirits. His mind was still thinking, well, only thinking about the things on the other side. He did not resist we dragging him around the world. It would be better if we could go to some more ordinary places. However, we always drag them to places with a lot of people, such as national landscapes, large squares, crowded pedestrian streets, major, all kinds of occasions, and he would aim to go where there were more people. That was really, traveling was like a show. Whenever they appeared, they would attract a grand crowd from all directions. He felt that this was purely looking for trouble for himself. It was rare for him to have a rest. Zhou Bai, the little girl, could not stand the excitement of running and flying all the way. She begged him to slow down so that they could rest in a corner of the amusement park with fewer people. Well, but why do you follow us out every time? Yin Nuoxing tilted his head and asked curiously. When he mentioned this, Zhou Bai stared at him with a very speechless expression. After thinking for a while, she sighed speechlessly. I will definitely sit farther away from you in the future. Although it was late autumn, it was not so cold that she needed to wrap herself up like a dumpling. After all, she was in the south, a place that was hidden from the rest of the country during winter. When she was dragged out, she was still wearing casual short-sleeved shirts and trousers. She only felt a little cool. As a cultivator, she did not care much about the changes in temperature. However, when this slight coolness appeared, there were already people on the road who were wearing down and wrapped in sweaters, as if they wanted to arm themselves into a fortress. There were also people who were still wearing short-sleeved shirts and shorts with infinite elegance, without caring about the temperature. When the two sides met on the street, they looked at each other and felt that there might be something wrong with each other. When they came to the amusement park on a weekday, there were not many people. It was not crowded, and there was no long line. However, there was still a certain number of people. They just sat on the chairs under the tree and watched the people running around in the amusement park, laughing and chatting with each other. It was quite comfortable. Yin Nuoxing, who used to dislike the hustle and bustle of people, even if she laughed too loudly, could also adapt to the atmosphere here. Ah, it sounded like a small exclamation that was quite close. The group of people turned their eyes and saw a big boy in casual clothes standing 2 to 3 meters away from them with a bottle of happy drink in his hand. It's you guys. I was too far away to confirm it. The big boy scratched his head and smiled shyly. Oh, who's that? That little guy who got caught up in bad luck. Hui sat up straight on the chair, moved to the side, and patted the chair. He and the big boy had not officially met. They just saw each other that night. How had you been these few days? Have you recovered from the inexplicable kidnapping? Well, the big boy took a sip of the drink and scratched his head. It still doesn't feel real. It happened all of a sudden and ended all of a sudden. It seems that I haven't recovered from that time. I don't know what's going on. However, these few days, there is no change as usual. I continue to live my life. I'm still a student. Well, the teacher heard about me and asked me to take a break for a while. So, I came here to play alone. You guys are here to play too? Hui pointed at Feng, who was sitting on the chair next to him and staring blankly ahead. I brought him out to relax. Recently, he has been too busy and overworked. This guy doesn't know how to rest. I have to let him have a good rest before he completely kills himself and turns into a lunatic. I think I am in a normal state. Yin Nuoxing responded faintly. Hui spread his hands and grinned. The big boy looked at Yin Nuoxing and smiled. See, I told you he was trying to be brave. Hui could not help but smile bitterly. He looked at Yin Nuoxing carefully. After a while, he felt that his mind was calm, and he laughed contentedly. She was very pleasing to the eye. That if it's possible, the big boy whispered in Huey's ear, I want to take a picture of her. Hui was slightly stunned. After a while, he burst out laughing. He was stunned for a while. He lowered his head and scratched his head embarrassedly. His expression was a little unnatural. Hui grinned and did not expose him. Instead, he turned his head and shouted, Feng, how about taking a picture? Why so suddenly? It doesn't matter. Yin Nuoxing tilted her head. However, She did not want him to pose like a puppet. Even so, after the big boy left enough photos, he still had a satisfied look on his face. He was secretly delighted, as if he had obtained a priceless treasure. Hui felt very sympathetic and secretly decided that it would be better not to expose the poor child's fantasy. Phone, you are a sinful guy. Hui cannot help but sigh. Yin nu washing? Question mark. Chapter 1780. He had told himself countless times that an ordinary life was the most suitable daily routine for him. He would repeat day after day like a normal person. He would not completely follow the prescribed routine. Occasionally, he would deviate a little from the norm, but he would not change the trajectory of his life. He would continue to be ordinary like this, forgetting that he had spiritual energy for cultivation, forgetting that he was a little bit different from ordinary people. Although he had said similar things to himself countless times, but, as expected, he still had an indescribable longing and yearning for an extraordinary and wider world. Even if he knew that as long as he took a step forward, his life would be turned upside down and he would not be able to adapt, he was still hopelessly fantasizing and longing for those things. Meeting them twice in such a short period of time made his curiosity increase by a few hundred times. Well, he just wanted to say the reason why he stayed here and did not want to leave. Mr. Hui was a very talkative person. He could talk about anything, including the people's lives and the current state of the world. Meeting them here was like delivering himself to the former's doorstep. The former caught someone he could talk about the things in this world without stopping. However, most of the time, he could only listen and could not get a word in. The other three sat quietly at the side, swaying gently under the sunlight. Well, for a moment, he was mesmerized. So, is there anything fun around here? Or do you know anything fun? Senior Hui suddenly waved his hand in front of him, making him come back to his senses. Seeing the former's teasing gaze, he could not help but feel a little embarrassed. Fun. It's the same for coming and going around here. I can't say whether it's fun or not. If you insist on talking about fun, at least you have to leave the place you're familiar with and go to the place others are familiar with. However, that's not within the scope of my understanding. It's not just entertainment for ordinary people. It can be something else. For example, some of the things you inadvertently saw or heard. We guided him step by step. That aspect, Big Boy was slightly startled. Without hesitation, he said, I haven't heard much about it. Perhaps it's because I don't pay much attention to it. However, in my personal opinion, as modern technology is getting more and more advanced, there should be very few places that have not been set foot or seen by humans except for the entire deep sea. For example, the spirits and stories of ancient times have probably been hidden away. Not necessarily, young man. There are still many secrets in this world that you can't understand. We chuckled softly. Just because the eyes can see doesn't mean that the eyes can see. The places that people have set foot on are the places that others have set foot on. The things that you know from afar are the things that others have recorded. The knowledge that you think about the world is actually a combination of the experiences and words of countless people. It is a comprehensive and one-sided information that others have imparted. Don't forget, you are different from the others. We pointed at his eyes and said, in this world where more than 99% of the living beings are different from you, don't be too hasty to think that everything you hear is everything you can know. The news you hear is not necessarily more accurate than seeing it yourself. There are some things that others can't see. The big boy nodded absent-mindedly, as if he was confused by Huey's words. So, are there any fun places? He was bored to death. Although he liked to slack off, this was the time to slack off and have fun. It's a waste of time just sitting here. The big boy smiled bitterly. Why did they come back to the topic again? If you really want to talk about a little interesting or a fun place, it's not like there isn't any. The big boy pondered and took out his mobile phone. He swiped it a few times as if he was looking for some information. I also just learned that there are few people in our class. A few days ago, it seemed like the day before I was kidnapped, the class monitor planned to organize the people in our class to go out to play. The destination was some distance away and not in the province. Although I didn't plan to go, I was curious when I heard that they were talking about it. Ah, as Senior Hui said, after all, I'm more or less different from ordinary people. I can also come into contact with some other news. It just happened that I found it when I was looking for the class monitor's destination. Ah, found it. Hui leaned over to take a look. The information displayed in front of him was a mountain and forest. As for the title, it skipped a lot of words. In short, someone was missing and it was unknown whether they were alive or dead. The following was also an introduction. The place was a natural scenic spot with a considerable area of primeval forest. It was very primitive. Therefore, there were many unknown areas that had not been developed and explored. There were mountains and forests. A few people disappeared just like that. The search team had been looking for them for half a month, but they couldn't even find a shadow or a trace. That's about it. Let's not talk about the following comments first. I want to show you this, Senior Hui. The big boy swiped a few times on the screen. The picture in a mobile phone flashed once, and the colors suddenly became dim. The report was still the same thing, but the comments had changed. Soaring Dragon Mountain has not been peaceful recently. 2 months ago, a team of newcomers went missing. This month, another team disappeared. I suggest changing the title to Soaring Dragon Mountain Underworld Incident. Is there any expert who can go and check it out? Did they encounter a secret realm? Or an immortal's cave? Or perhaps the sudden change in the terrain had caused them to disappear? It's better to do a live broadcast. Last time, the person who did the live broadcast couldn't even be seen. The newcomers you're talking about are the 2 newcomers who have reached the 4th level of the human realm. The Alliance doesn't plan to deal with this matter. Recently, the Alliance has been in a mess because of a damn organization that appeared in the country out of nowhere. All the forces have been sent out. They don't have time to deal with things here. Don't ask me how I know. If you ask, there are people inside. Didn't I hear that there are 3 big shots who are helping the Alliance? Even they can't deal with it? This matter can't be left to others to deal with. Is the Alliance shameless? After all, they're not really from the Alliance. If they were, it would be fine. We looked at it for a while and realized that this was a comment section for martial cultivators. The image on the whiteboard just now was for ordinary people. Oh, so that's how it is. There's such a function. Although I already knew about it, I didn't know the reason until I contacted Senior Liu. It is said that the Alliance set it up so that cultivators can keep up with this era and communicate more easily. Big Boy nodded and pointed to the report. Soaring Dragon Mountain is where the class monitor and the others are going. When I saw it, I thought it was quite dangerous. But after thinking about it carefully, I don't think they are that unlucky, right? Probably. Plus, I happen to be kidnapped. I really can't go. Although I reminded them in the group, they don't seem to have any plans to change their destination. The tickets have been bought long ago. I heard that a refund is a small matter. The main thing is that it is troublesome to arrange other things, so I didn't say much. Speaking of which, the day they set off seems to be yesterday. Last night, they slept at the foot of the mountain. Today, they will climb the mountain. Big Boy paused and laughed dryly. They can't be that unlucky, can they? It can't be, right? It's hard to say. Big Boy thought seriously for a moment. I think I will sink to seek pleasure. Sometimes, giving up decisively was also a form of courage. It was just that, all right, there was probably no point in struggling for ordinary people. If you look around here, you should be able to see a lot of similar strange things. Big Boy lowered his head and continued to scroll through the comments. After a while, he closed it. I don't know anything else for the time being. How could we not know what Big Boy was thinking when he saw Big Boy's flickering eyes and slightly worried look? He immediately jumped up and clapped his hands. Okay, then let's go to Soaring Dragon Mountain. If there's anything, just solve it. If there's nothing else, just treat it as a lung cleansing in the ecological zone. Yin Nuashing said in his soul, "Do you have lungs?" This sigh, although it is a body used to pretend to be a human, and the function is just for decoration, but just treat it as if you have it. Don't worry about these details. Hui grinned and waved his hand. Sigh, are we really going? Big Boy scratched his head and stood up slowly. He finished the cola in his hand in one gulp, threw away the trash, and let out a long sigh of relief. Okay, then let's go. Why are you so reluctant? Aren't you worried about your classmate? Big Boy was silent for a moment, and his face was bitter. Deep in the mountains and forests. I'm a little scared. There are a lot of insects there. There are four-legged, six-legged, eight-legged, one-winged, two-winged, crawling, screaming, drilling in the body, ear-piercing, and the eight-legged one is as big as a wash basin. The net is as big as 2 or 3 meters. When she heard the words eight-legged and as big as a wash basin, Nuashing trembled violently. Goosebumps appeared on her skin, and her cheeks twitched wildly. I'm not going. Sigh. Stop fooling around. Hurry up and leave. I won't. I won't. I won't go. Let me go. I don't want to see 8 legs as big as a wash basin. If you want to go, go by yourself. If you let me get close to that thing, I might as well blow up the entire mountain. Let me go up. Help. Zhou Zibai and the other 2 girls. This was the first time they had seen Yin Nuashing have such intense emotional fluctuations. Her indifferent, otherworldly, and immortal-like temperament collapsed in an instant. Half an hour later, on the high-speed train heading to Longting Mountain Road, Yin Nuashing was shivering and curled up with a pale face. Zhou Zibai looked at her, who was simply like a frightened little girl, and couldn't help but laugh. Are you afraid of spiders? Yin Nuashing's face turned green and white. She looked at her with a rather bitter expression. Psychological trauma. In short, they arrived at Longting Mountain after an hour and a half. Green mountains and clear waters surrounded by clouds and mist. The distant mountains and valleys were only faintly discernible in the mist. The precipitousness and beauty could be seen at a glance, as if it was a paradise on earth. Coupled with the misty weather today, it was simply a perfect match for the scene in front of them. Ah, it really looks like a place for immortal cultivation. Look at this immortal aura. The big boy couldn't help but sigh as he looked at the clouds and mist floating on top of the mountain. That's just a cloud of mist. Come closer, it's misty. How can it be immortal aura? That's what I meant. Hui grinned, but the air in this place is quite good. When I was in the city, I always felt that something was wrong with my nose. Although it's harmless to us, I can't get used to it. Yin Nuashing looked up and said, it's so short. The big boy couldn't help but say, it's not about the height of the mountain. It's famous because there are immortals. Yin Nuashing shook her head. No, although it's a place with pleasant scenery, it's just a deep mountain forest. There's no breath of life worth mentioning. The big boy took a deep breath and smiled bitterly. Sure enough, coming out to play with surreal people is really completely out of touch with reality. Whether it's the vision of the past or something else, they can always destroy it with just a few words. It's really a waste of youth. Ah, but there seems to be a place worth looking at. Yin Nuashing looked up at a mountain surrounded by clouds and mist. For the time being, her expression returned to normal. What do you see? Hui stood next to Phone and looked at the place he was looking at curiously. I don't know for the time being, but there's a faint aura of energy flowing. I'm a little curious. Yin Nuashing looked and nodded. She lifted her foot and was about to jump from the side of the cliff. Zhou Zibai hurriedly pulled her back. That's not an open area. Oh no, there's someone here. Don't make too much noise here. Yin Nuashing was stunned for a moment. She looked around and found that the place they were staying in was quite empty. There were many cars parked in an orderly manner. It was probably a parking area. From a distance, she could see wooden buildings, stone decorations, and rockery. There were not many people coming and going, and they were all quite lively. The place to stay at the foot of the mountain. The big boy looked around and pointed to the road behind the wooden buildings and said, that's the road to Soaring Dragon Mountain. If you walk, you have to take the mountain road on the other side. Half of it is man-made, and the other half is a mountain road in the forest. I heard that the scenery there is better, but the road is quite far. It's estimated that you can't go up without 7 or 8 hours. There are also hotels halfway up the mountain. The class leader and the others have booked hotels at the foot of the mountain and halfway up the mountain. They should be staying on the mountain for a night or two. According to the time they arrived at the foot of the mountain, it was built next to the cliff. This place was already deep in the mountain. They had built a foothold on a relatively stable open platform. If you walked to the edge, you could see the mountains and rivers that were about 2 to 3 meters drop in the distance. They meandered around a distance of tens of meters to reach here. They flowed along the edge of the hotel area to the other side. There was a mellow and pleasant sound as it flowed past. If you removed the people here, it would have a somewhat tranquil atmosphere. I think we can go up along this river. Yin Nuashing was dragged away by Hui halfway. She smiled bitterly as she walked. Can you walk a bit more like a human? Then let's fly over. I'm a little concerned about the energy aura I just sensed on the mountain. So there are people here, then hide and teleport directly. Hui LVE scratched his head a little helplessly. He understood. He understood that a certain guy was in an abnormally excited state because he was worried about seeing something deep in the mountains and forests. A negative state was definitely not a positive state. At this moment, if he were to encounter something with 5, 6, 7, or 8 legs, he wouldn't blow up other people's scenic spots into a forbidden area, right? We couldn't dissuade a certain someone who was a little excited and excited. He had to help encircle Zhou Jibai and the others in his domain. He aimed at the place where Feng had been talking about something for a long time and immediately teleported over. They were standing in front of the hotel at the foot of the mountain just now. In the next second, they suddenly arrived at a place full of dense forests. Their line of sight seemed to be covered by a layer of vague light and shadow. The big boy was slightly startled and exclaimed in astonishment, "Teleportation? Can you do this kind of thing?" Zhou Jibai had just taken 2 steps when she suddenly thought of something. She turned back and said to him, "Calm down, you'll get used to it. Don't make a fuss about anything you see." She sighed as she was dragged by the 3 of them. They climbed and dived in midair at a speed far beyond the speed of sound. 3,600-degree spiral. This little boy would experience it sooner or later. The slightly pitiful and sympathetic gaze made the big boy immediately shiver. Goosebumps covered his arms. Why did I just have the illusion that I was spiraling into the sky? A dense forest that was not open to the public. Well, that was not right. There was no proper road to get to this place. The mountain was as straight as a pillar. There was no road that could be built around the mountain. If you wanted to get here, you could only climb up step by step with your feet and hands. Zhou Jibai had been to similar scenic spots in the past, but she had never thought that one day she would come to such a completely primitive area that no one had set foot in at all. She couldn't help but feel a little worried. "Oh, I seem to feel something too." Hui sniffed and waved his hand to push away the clouds and fog lingering in the forest. He walked 2 steps faster, and the others also trotted. They crossed the forest in front of them and the entangled roots on the ground. Something that both of them cared about suddenly rushed into their sight, which made Zhou Jibai and the big boy slightly surprised. In front of them was a pit that might be more than 10 meters in diameter. It was a huge impact crater. It looked like it had been hit by a small meteorite, uprooting all the trees here and falling on the impact crater. They just came out of the forest and stood at the edge of the impact crater. When they saw the scene in front of them, they couldn't help but stretch their necks. Zhou Jibai looked back. In the distance was the mountain road of the scenic spot. This was a place that couldn't be reached. The impact crater just happened to have its back to the road of the scenic spot. Standing at the top of the mountain, one could barely achieve the effect of having a view of the mountains. If they wanted to explore the situation here, they could only use a helicopter. Obviously, no one knew what had happened here. A shallow layer of new vegetation grew on the uprooted ground, and the fallen trees also sprouted new buds. This place had been damaged for some time. A meteorite? The big boy whispered, constantly looking at the impact crater in front of them. It should be a meteorite, right? But I don't think I've heard of any meteorites falling. Whether it's a meteorite or not, we'll know when we see it now. Come on, we've found the culprit. Hui waved his hand and took the lead to walk into the impact crater from the edge to the center. In the center, hidden in the vegetation and forest debris, was a black fragment that was 7 or 8 meters long. It looked very rough and slender, but it was only long and not big in size. It stabbed into the ground obliquely, tearing a crack in the ground that was 1 foot wide. Now, even new plants grew out of the crack. This looks like a meteorite fragment. The big boy curiously circled around the black thing. The black fragment was very quiet here, without any signs of life. If it was a meteorite, it would have cooled down long ago. However, in the line of sight, there seemed to be some black, dark clouds and mist flowing on the surface. Senior Hui, do you see the flowing clouds and mist? The black ones, those are... Step back, little guy. That's the energy that it leaked. It hasn't completely cooled down yet. Hui reached out and pulled the boy back. Your body can't withstand the attack of this energy. The big boy scratched his head and suddenly understood. Ah, yes, I heard that meteorites have radiation, but I have spiritual energy to protect my body. It shouldn't be that bad, right? This is not radiation. Hui shook his head and looked at Phone. Both of them looked a little serious. The dark aura that left traces all over the world, showed an unusually high concentration on this fragment. The concentration was so high that it was shocking. It seems to be the aura that was entrenched in Jiang City. Zhou Zhibai's expression was slightly serious. Even here is affected, and this aura seems to be more. Feng Ling, this aura seems to be stronger than the one we saw underground. Oh, you can feel it. It was Hui who answered. He nodded to the two little guys and pointed at the black fragment. This thing, for you, is already something that could destroy a country. Zhou Zhibai and the big boy's bodies trembled violently, revealing a frightened expression. If we say that the dark aura in Jiangchang City and all over the world can only subtly affect people, then this... Yes, let me think. If we throw into the Pacific Ocean, this small blue planet will turn into a small black ball tomorrow. That's the extent of it. The dim dark aura was like a cloud that kept steaming. It wanted to spread out, but it seemed to be difficult to cross the range of 3 meters. No matter how it released the dark aura, it would disappear in an instant when it reached 3 meters. It was not hidden, but really disappeared, as if something was suppressing it here. Chapter 1781. The impact crater had long been filled with new vegetation and green sprouts. The recovery of vitality had covered up any clues that might have been left here. Now, the most obvious trace left behind was the crack where the shard had pierced through the ground at an oblique angle. The area within 10 feet of where the shard had touched the ground was still barren. Except for this area, there were signs of vitality returning to normal. The dark aura emanating from the shard would instantly disappear when it reached a distance of 10 feet. It was as if it had come into contact with a black hole that could devour its energy. This suppressive thing that came from nowhere and was hidden in some unknown place had turned this aura, which should have been able to turn everything within a radius of 100 or even 1,000 miles into a barren land, into a caged beast. Yin Nuoxing and the other two were curious. They walked back and forth in the impact pit for a long time. Zhou Zhibai and the big boy also helped to search the place full of vegetation and weeds. After a few laps, they found nothing but grass all over their bodies. Forget it. If we can't find any trace, let's ignore it for the time being. We felt that he was asking for a snub. He waved his hand to stop everyone from working in vain. He stretched out his hand and pressed on the shard. Golden energy surged. This thing's activity is limited to 3 meters by something. But if we leave it here, it will inevitably be unpredictable. Anyway, it's better to put it away first. The gloomy breath, the negative breath, even if it had 30% of the breath of the chaotic void of the 3-elemental realm, it would be fine as long as he used the power of order to trap it. Even if it used all its strength, it would not be able to break free from the cage of order. With a wave of his hand, he put the dangerous object that had the power to pollute an entire planet into his own dimension. There was only a 3-meter radius impact crater with a remnant of the gloomy breath and a 6-meter-long crack torn by the shard. Then, I'll leave it to you, Maple. This is a contaminated area. Purify it. Well, let's not care about the impact crater. Not many people will have the opportunity to notice it. When new vegetation grows, it will be covered up. By then, it will naturally be regarded as a natural cause. Zhou Zibai felt that something was wrong. Leaving the scene that was accidentally destroyed, only taking away the culprit, and allowing new traces of life to cover the already harmless scene, made her suddenly enlightened. Could it be that the weird scenes in the world were left behind for the same reason? This. Hui smiled and shook his head. No, I don't know what you're talking about. If I really want to say, I can only say that it's possible. Living beings at our level, if we casually make a little damage on the ground and leave behind two residue, we can be mistaken as a sacred trace left by someone from somewhere. He wasn't bragging. When he was dealing with something in another world, he accidentally left the cup that he had used there. Tens of thousands of years later, when he went back to check on the situation, he found that the cup had been worshipped as a holy object. That was the life star of a human being who had just been born. Although it was normal for them to be regarded as saints or gods at their level, he still felt weird about it. When they were muttering about this, there was a burst of energy behind them. When they turned around, they saw the ground in front of Yin Nuoxing. There was a blue flame that rose 3 to 4 meters high from the ground and wrapped around the surrounding area. It looked like a blue bonfire. Blue fire. It's obviously a fire, but I can't feel the temperature at all. Zhou Zibai circled the blue flame twice and curiously reached out to touch it, but she was stopped by Yin Nuoxing. The temperature is locked inside. It's the temperature of a star. If you touch it, you'll turn into ashes. Zhou Zibai shuddered and retreated a few meters away. In the process of a few seconds, the ground wrapped in the blue flame was the first to melt and peel off. The dark breath was exposed and mixed with the flame, releasing a huge amount of energy. That was the dark breath that had accumulated here. It could not leave this 3-meter radius circle. On the other hand, it had been settling in this circle for at least 3 to 4 years. Although the main body was no longer there, it was still very dangerous. About 5 minutes later, the blue flame slowly swayed and disappeared. The dark breath completely disappeared, leaving only a complete and smooth hemispherical pit on the ground. It condensed into a black mirror-like surface and was in a state of complete cooling. Even the residual heat could not be felt. He let his arm brush the air. In his perception, the dark breath had completely dissipated. The energy concentration in the space had dropped to the point that it was almost exhausted. The weak energy in the surroundings began to flow here to fill the hole. When the time comes, we will ask that little girl about this fragment. We don't know anything. We don't know anything. A fragment of 7 to 8 meters long. For the time being, they didn't know what it was torn off from. There was only one way to deal with it. But after all, they were not professionals. At present, they could control it, so they didn't arbitrarily deal with it. This troublesome thing should be left to the cloaked girl to deal with it herself. After confirming that the surroundings had been restored to safety, Hui turned around and was about to go into the mountain. Then he suddenly stopped and looked at Feng, who followed him. Is it really okay? I haven't found anything yet, but isn't there a dark cloud in the soaring dragon mountain itself? Yin Nuoxing shook her head and flung her long hair. She looked across the woods in front of her and looked at the place shrouded in clouds and fog that looked like a fairyland. It is just a problem left behind. It is not the purpose of our trip. Hey, that's what I said, but every time I go out, I will encounter some small situations. Isn't this a little bit worrying? We held the back of his head and said very casually. Glancing at Feng's overly indifferent expression, he suddenly laughed in his heart. Look, 8 legs. Yin Nuoxing's expression trembled. She swept her eyes across the woods as if she had seen a ghost. She almost pulled out the Netherworld Ruin Sword. She quickly jumped behind Hui and pushed him forward, shouting as she walked. You go in front and open the way. Zhou Zibai couldn't help but smile bitterly. This guy who floats like an immortal has completely collapsed. According to the original plan, they were going to be in halfway up the soaring dragon mountain to find. Huh. Speaking of which, I haven't asked for your name yet. Hui slapped his head and turned to look at Big Boy. People who have lived for so long don't care about names. It is just a code name. Compared to remembering a code name, they are more used to remembering a person's soul. After all, things like appearance can be changed, and there are many ways and reasons. Basically, 80% of people maintain the original appearance of their soul. 20% is hard to say, especially a group of energy life forms like them in the realm of the gods. It doesn't take much effort for them to change their appearance, but they prefer to use their original soul appearance to show others. Big Boy covered his eyes and turned his head. After a long while, he said slowly, "Actually, I am relieved that you don't call me by my name. My name is Southern Airlines." "Oh, doesn't that sound good? I thought it was a name that was too embarrassing to say." Big Boy smiled bitterly and turned his head. Southern Airlines, Southern Airlines, everyone. Ah, this is a very meaningful name. I heard from my mother that my father was a pilot. His dream is to own a private jet sooner or later, or open his own airline. And then, Southern Airlines took a deep breath and said, "The result of 20 years of hard work is to give me a name." Hui smiled bitterly. Good Lord, this dream has fallen into the Pacific Ocean. The group of people returned to the scenic area of soaring Dragon Mountain. After walking around for a while, they arrived at the mountainside. Just like the information that Southern Airlines had previously investigated, there was also a hotel on the mountainside. The style was similar to the hotel at the foot of the mountain. Large and small cars were lined up in 2 or 3 rows. Some people simply stopped by the roadside and held a big barrel to take pictures of the beautiful scenery in the mountain. Moreover, they would take a step forward after taking a picture. After taking a picture, they would take a step forward. After taking a picture, they would take a step forward. After taking a picture, they would take another step forward. Where are your classmates now? Standing on the edge of the cliff and looking at the scenery for a while, Hui turned back to look at Southern Airlines. This big boy had been looking through his phone when he came here. He heard Huey's words and shook his head helplessly. The news only shows that they have entered the soaring Dragon Mountain scenic area. That's all. I'll go to the hotel and see if I can find them. After saying this, Southern Airlines went straight to the hotel and didn't bother to greet them. Hui and the others weren't anxious or worried. They stood by the roadside and looked at the relaxing scenery together. The steep mountains in the distance, the clearly visible height difference, and the deep canyons. The overlapping mountains were like layers of barriers erected on the ground. It was really so short. Yin Nuashing couldn't help but whisper. Hui smiled bitterly and knocked him on the head, whispering, "This place is not the realm of the gods. It's normal for the mountains to be short. If they were the size of the hundreds of millions of mountains in the ultimate plain region, you would have to risk your life just to survive." Yin Nuashing shook his head and looked at the misty sky in the distance. The sky is so short. Hui was helpless. This was the limitation of this small planet. There was nothing he could do. Why were they talking about how short the sky was and how short the mountains were? Where was that big boy? He looked back in the direction of the hotel. Just as he was about to go and take a look, he saw the big boy running out of the hotel in a panic. Looking at the big boy, he couldn't help but sigh. He reached out and pulled Maple to greet him. "Let's go. It seems that we have something to do again." "Senior Hui." Just as the big boy rushed in front of Hui, Hui calmly waved his hand to stop him from speaking. His other hand covered half of his face. Something happened, right? Southern Airlines nodded nervously. When he was about to speak again, Hui waved his hand and walked in the direction of the hotel. "Anyway, let's go and take a look first. Don't worry and don't panic. If you panic now, you'll just be wasting your energy. Save some energy to deal with the trouble later." Looking at their figures, Southern Airlines suddenly smiled bitterly and hurriedly followed their footsteps. Wherever they went, there would be trouble. Or wherever they went, they would be involved in some trouble. This kind of talent had reached the maximum level and couldn't be removed. Yin Nuashing said that he was very used to it. He and Hui could achieve this kind of effect when they went out alone. Now, the two of them went out together and came to a small mortal world in the 3 elements realm that was very easily influenced by them. The result of this influence was afraid that they would be involved in all kinds of disasters, from the search for the lost dog next door to the world next door. In short, Looking at Southern Airlines' panicked appearance, something must have happened. His classmates happened to come to this bad place at this bad time and happened to encounter something. The probability of them being involved in that bad thing should not be very high. If it was just an ordinary thing, for ordinary people in such a primitive place with high mountains and deep valleys, there were only a few things that could happen. The worst result? That would be the result. The two results pointed to the same end. In a small room on the side of the hotel lobby, a girl who looked about the same age as Southern Airlines was sitting in front of a table and chair. Her face was full of anxiety and nervousness. Most of her attention was placed on the mobile phone on the table. Beside her was the hotel staff who had been comforting her, accompanied by two security guards. This girl was probably Southern Airlines' classmate, but why was she alone? Why is she alone? We couldn't help but ask in a low voice. You said there are a few people in your class. Are there only a few people? Southern Airlines shook his head with a wry smile and replied in a low voice. There are a total of 17 people. The one sitting there is my classmate Song Ro. I heard most of it when I came in. They came halfway up the mountain in the morning, but Song Ro felt a little uncomfortable halfway up the mountain, so the class monitor suggested that they stay in the hotel to rest. They agreed to wait until Song Ro recovered in the afternoon to go into the mountain together, and then we looked around. Then when the little girl woke up, she found that she was alone. The others probably couldn't sit still and wanted to go into the mountain, but now they can't even be seen. Southern Airlines sighed deeply. That's about it. It has been 3 hours since she woke up. We can't contact her at all and are a little panicked. In the mountains, there's signal all the way, so it's not impossible to contact her. If there's really a reason why we can't contact her, it can only be Zhou Jibai. She went into an undeveloped area. She saw Southern Airlines nod and couldn't help but frown. In such a primitive environment, she suddenly deviated from the safe route and went to an unknown place, and even lost contact. If it was just an ordinary loss of contact, it would be fine. If something happened, it would be really difficult to call for help. The search and rescue team seems to have set off, but I'm still a little worried. Southern Airlines sighed with a sad face. If he hadn't seen that incident, he would at most be worried that the person might have gone far away for fun and might come back in a while. Song Ro also had the same idea, so she kept staring at her phone and waiting. But what if it wasn't? In these hundreds of mountains, looking for 15 people, we can't use outside of the standard method now. We scratched his head in distress. After thinking for a while, he suddenly walked over and squatted down beside the girl. Miss Song Ro, come look in my eyes. The little girl, who was uneasy, obeyed the command almost without thinking. She turned her head and met Huey's golden eyes. Her eyes trembled slightly, and her brain seemed to be comforted by an invisible force. The panic on her face quickly faded. You are? A friend of Southern Airlines. We just happened to come here to see the scenery. I heard from him that some of his classmates also came here, so I asked him to come and say hello. I didn't expect you to encounter something. Huey's grin occupied the girl's entire line of sight with a 1,000,000-point smile. Yin Nuashing rolled her eyes. This guy almost blinded the eyes of everyone in the room. We turned back and grinned at Feng, who cast a contemptuous look at him and continued to ask Song Ro in a soothing voice. Time is urgent. Let's keep it simple. Calm down first. Just think about one thing. When they were on the road, yes, along the way, looking at the map or looking at the scenery, did they casually or specifically mention where they wanted to go to see the scenery? Where do they want to see the scenery? Think about it carefully. Wind, scenery. Song Ro lowered her head and furrowed her brows as she tried hard to recall the conversations she had with her classmates along the way. Many messy messages rushed in her mind like a floodgate, and just thinking about it made her feel uneasy. Waterfall. After waiting for a long time, the girl whispered these two words. She raised her head, and her eyes widened as if she had caught hope. They said they wanted to see the waterfall. It should be only this. Waterfall? Is it the waterfall in the Longquan district? At this time, the hotel staff heard it and turned to look at the map hanging on the side. He frowned. There are several waterfalls in the Longquan district. The largest waterfall is 100 meters away from the sightseeing spot in a straight line. It is far enough to see the whole picture. It is also a place that many people like to go. That group of students didn't go there, right? Will there be no signal in that place? Zhou Zibai asked. There will be a signal, but as I said just now, there will be a signal in the normal sightseeing route. If you deviate from the sightseeing route by 50 meters, there will not necessarily be a signal. Hui comforted Song Ro with a few words. He got up and looked at Feng and the others. He quietly left the room and slipped out of the hotel door. Looking at the place where more than 100 people stayed, he sighed. There are naughty children every year. When will they stop worrying? Nan Hang said, they are around 20 years old. They can't be considered naughty children, right? They haven't grown up, and their minds haven't fully developed. They are causing trouble everywhere. From 3 years old to 300 million years old, they are all naughty children. Hui rolled his eyes, put his hands on his hips, and said in a bad mood, at least think of a way to solve the trouble they cause before they take the initiative to cause trouble. Longquan District, right? Let's go. Let's go. We might have to carry a dozen coffins later. Yin Nuoxing rolled her eyes, turned to the little girl, and nodded. She shook her head helplessly. It's really busy everywhere we go. The power of the void allowed the 5 of them to escape into the shadows, temporarily breaking away from the connection with the real world. Zhou Zibai saw this and knew something was wrong. She quickly grabbed Yin Nuoxing, and Hui pulled the entire void domain and rushed towards the mountains, leaving behind 2 long screams in the air. In the dense forest off the main road, a group of young men and women were sweating profusely as they walked in the forest with the remnants of dead branches and withered leaves. In this dense forest, where the roots of the trees were twisted into knots on the ground, there was nothing that could be called a road at all. They were just pushing away the leaves and the jungle along the way, stepping on the space that was not covered by vegetation but occupied by other things, and moving forward with difficulty. Why haven't we arrived yet? Is it really this way? A young man with a map in his hand was sweating profusely. He picked up a green leaf that fell on the map and couldn't help but wipe the sweat on his face. But it shouldn't be. According to the road on the map, it should be in this direction, right? Hey, don't tell me we went the wrong way. If we get lost in this damn place, don't worry, listen, there's the sound of the waterfall. Even if we get lost, we just have to follow the direction of the sound of the water. We won't really get lost. But why don't we go back? There might be poisonous snakes and insects in this primitive forest. It would be troublesome if we get bitten or stung, a girl said softly. She was a little scared when she saw that there was no sunlight in the surroundings. How is that possible? How can these things be regarded as a scenic spot? Don't be afraid, just because of the primitive jungle. They must have explored it long ago. Don't worry. Class leader, how far have we walked? I'm tired of exploring this jungle. The young man with the map frowned impatiently. Isn't it because you guys insisted on going to the top of the waterfall? Forget it. We said in the beginning that we shouldn't take shortcuts. We should have gone around to the back of the Longquan area, closer to the waterfall, and then go in a straight line. Why do we have to take the shortcut in the forest halfway? What kind of shortcut is there? But I wasn't the only one who suggested it. It was you guys. Okay, stop talking. The class leader swatted away the leaves on his face and saw a gray shadow pass by in front of his eyes. He subconsciously trembled, looked around, and calmly let out a long breath. Anyway, since we've been brought to this place, let's think of a way to get to the destination first. The sound of water in their ears was the only road sign, but it was also the most unreliable road sign. Without walking a certain distance, it was difficult to tell whether the sound was getting weaker or stronger. But at this moment, there was no other way. Since the sound of water was still on the left, as long as they walked in front, they should be able to find the normal path when they reach the open area of the jungle, right? Class leader, did you hear that the sound of water seems to be getting softer? Did we really go the wrong way? Don't scare yourself. The sound of water is still there, but why is the sky? It seemed a little darker. It's not going to rain, right? The class leader's footsteps slowed down a little. He frowned and looked around. He secretly lamented that he chose the wrong place. If he had known earlier, he would have gone to the artificial scenic spot. Or, if he didn't let them leave the hotel in the first place, would it be so troublesome? The dusky afternoon sky gradually darkened a little. The sound of water coming from the right front made him feel a burst of anxiety. Chapter 1782. The sky gradually darkened, as if a storm was about to descend. Even the atmosphere in the primitive forest became a little scary and gloomy. The sound of the wind and the footsteps sweeping the fallen leaves were accompanied by a rustling sound effect. The bleak feeling made the deep mountains in late autumn even colder. Wearing one or two thin, long-sleeve clothes, it was difficult to completely resist the gradually dropping temperature here. It wasn't just because of the shock in his heart. The swaying of the surrounding trees made him feel like there were demons wantonly dancing wildly. The sound of the wind blowing through the branches and leaves made him feel like something was running wildly in the jungle and pushing him away. Class leader, did the sound of the water change its position? Are we lost? The girl walking in the middle of the group had an unnatural expression. She always felt like something in the jungle was watching them. The obscure gaze was like a hunter trying to hide himself. Don't talk nonsense and scare yourself. It's just a jungle. At most, there's some small insects jumping around. How about we change the path? I also heard the sound of the water change its position. The tall young man holding the map stopped in his tracks. Which direction did you hear the sound of the water coming from? Isn't it still to the left? Right in front. Behind, I just said. Everyone who spoke in unison was surprised and looked at each other in dismay. It was difficult to see from each other's expressions that they were joking. The class leader rolled up the map in his hand and said, "From the beginning, the sound of the water came from the right in front. I say, we can't all be possessed, right? Hey, this isn't fun. I heard that there are flowers in the primitive jungle that have pollen that can slightly cause hallucinations. There are also some plants that can confuse." A girl wearing glasses whispered, "We might have accidentally inhaled the pollen. It's difficult to determine the direction now." No way. The class leader's face was ugly. He freed his hand to take out his phone and turn on the compass. He swept around in a circle and looked at the needle on the screen that was spinning like a top with a face of astonishment. "What the hell? This place is haunted. Which one of you can tell the direction?" Everyone shook their heads vigorously. Their compass had failed, and their ears were probably useless now. This was their first time here, and they couldn't recognize the terrain. They couldn't see anything familiar that could help them identify the direction. With these conditions in front of them, they panicked. This was equivalent to getting lost. "All right, calm down," the class leader yelled. "Anyway, let's keep moving forward. There's no point in panicking right now. The most important thing is to find a safe place to rest." I remember that there's water near the Long Quan area, so we should be able to see it if we keep going in one direction. When the time comes, we can just follow the river back. Live-action version of Man vs. Wild. A boy adjusted his backpack and could not help but smile bitterly. Why don't you say it's a jungle escape? If something alive were to jump out of this godforsaken place, I think we would be scared to death first. Small insects and small animals are very cute. Don't be so nervous. The boy's cheeks twitched a few times. If a bear jumps out, it'll think we're quite cute. Or if a 4 to 5 meter tall grasshopper jumps out, I think we'll be quite cute in its eyes. No. I've been to a lot of primeval ecological zones. If there really were bears, the scenic spots would have mentioned it at the beginning, and there would also be signs by the roadside. It's not mentioned here, is it? There seems to be an empty space in front, right? I saw the tree disappear. Everyone was ecstatic when they heard this and ran forward energetically. The class leader saw this and quickly shouted, "Don't run. There's no way to treat your injuries if you fall down here." He did not retreat from the dense forest. At most, they came to the edge of the forest and came to a cliff. Right in front of them was a valley with a vertical drop of tens of meters. No, it might be more than 100 meters. The valley was semicircular. In the center was the largest waterfall in the Long Quan district. Judging from the position, They were standing at the opening of the valley. They were a little off from the path that they had marked at the beginning, so they were still some distance away from the top of the waterfall. However, no one would have the courage to walk the rest of the way. The place where the waterfall hit accumulated a dark blue and green lake inside the valley. The overflowing water turned into 3 streams that were 3 to 4 feet wide and flowed in the direction of the mouth of the valley. Then, through the mouth of the valley, a drop of more than 10 meters fell into the river covered by the forest below. This was not the main point. The main point was that in the center of the valley, there was a big blue lizard. I think that lizard should be 10 meters long, but from this distance, even 10 meters seems small in the distance. Is it more than 10 meters? Stop joking. Isn't that a prehistoric giant beast? Do you think it's an octopus from the deep sea? I'm not sleepy when you talk about the deep sea. Classmate, please give me some time. Let me tell you about our Heavenly Father. Don't talk about that. I understand, but why is that lizard so big? The class leader looked at the group of students who were still in the mood to point at the blue lizard and talk about it. They even had the mood to take out their phones and cameras to take pictures. These guys should know what's going on, right? He fiercely rubbed his face and calmed down. Encountering a prehistoric giant beast in a primitive ecological area, that's not a funny joke. According to the saying of this century, it should be impossible for a giant beast of this size to exist on land. There's no space for them to live on land, unless it's in the deep sea where humans have not yet explored. Ah, is that why they don't treat it as a living thing? He thought for a bit, took out a pair of binoculars from his backpack, and glanced at the blue lizard lying in the valley. He looked at it and felt, why doesn't this thing look like a lizard? Through the binoculars, he could see that the big lizard was curled up. It had beautiful blue scales and a faint white pattern. Perhaps it was because it was too far away and the scales and patterns were too similar, so it looked like a big guy lying there. In fact, it was lying there, and its slender body was curled up into a few segments. He adjusted the magnification of the binoculars and took another look. Well, this was the full picture. It looked like a big blue snake with a pair of horns on its head. A blue snake with a long horn? Cold sweat dripped down from the class leader's forehead. He trembled as he put away the binoculars, patted everyone's shoulders, and pointed in the direction of the valley entrance when everyone was confused. Don't worry about it. Let's go quickly. This place is too strange. I don't want to be on the news tomorrow, and on the global news. A university student mistakenly entered a primeval scenic spot and saw a prehistoric giant beast. I even thought of a headline for myself. That makes sense. Then let's hurry up and go. We've already found the way here, so let's go back. Seeing that everyone had no plans to stay here, the class leader let out a sigh of relief. Without further ado, he immediately walked to the front and led the way. It was also at this time that a rustling sound came from the forest, and it definitely wasn't the effect of the wind. It made everyone's hair stand on end. Who is it? Chill. Don't be so loud. The class leader had a headache as he held the 2 guys who were shouting at each other. He carried the backpack in his hand, his face full of sweat. Just as he was about to throw the backpack at them, if they came with bad intentions, a person rushed out of the forest and surprised him. He actually knew that person. Southern Airlines? Why are you here? Huh? Didn't you hit your head and didn't come with us? I know. Nan was lonely, so he planned to come with us alone to give us a surprise. Class leader. Big Boy was also surprised when he saw the dozen or so people who had just recovered from their vigilance. He couldn't help but smile bitterly when he heard those words. He quickly took off the leaves on his face and ran over while panting. What kind of surprise is this? I heard, I was bored and came here to play. I just happened to see Song Ro at the Mountainside Hotel. She said you guys lost contact for 3 or 4 hours, so I hurried over. You guys are really something, running so far away from the route in a primeval scenic spot. You're already 500 or 600 meters in. The class leader smiled bitterly and winked. The girls behind him couldn't help but glare at the boys and exonerate the class leader. It's all because of this group of idiots. They insisted on going to the top of some waterfall and we were worried that they would lose contact if they walked by themselves, so we had to come together. The hotel is in a mess. Even the search and rescue team was sent out. We secretly came to find you guys. As long as you guys are fine, hurry up. Hey, what's that? The big boy patted his chest and looked around. Naturally, he caught a glimpse of something lying in the valley. He shuddered. That shape, that figure, and that sleeping posture. Dragon? No, why would there be a... Yeah, I didn't expect there to be a prehistoric giant beast in this place. It scared us, but it's hard to say whether it's a dragon or not. Anyway, let's hurry up and leave while it's sleeping. The class leader whispered in his ear. Nanhang nodded and turned around. Senior Hui, let's go back. Hey, Senior Hui? Behind him was a dense forest. The wind was still and the trees were quiet. He couldn't hear the sound of insects, and he couldn't see anyone. If he used his spiritual energy to sense, he could only sense the aura of the 16 of them. But he still remembered that there were people following him. Why? Who are you calling? The class leader looked at the dense forest strangely. After thinking for a while, his face turned ugly. You didn't come here with people, but you lost them, so you came to find us, right? Nanhang opened his mouth. I was actually brought here. Before, my friend told me that he saw someone's footprints and pointed in this direction. So, his expression trembled violently, and he suddenly jumped back vigilantly. Class leader, what did I do during the school anniversary half a month ago? The class leader looked at him strangely and scratched his head. You brat, after being kidnapped, even your memory was formatted? Wasn't the school anniversary a month ago? That night, you were drunk and sang under the dormitory. Don't say it, cough. I thought I went crazy. Nanhang hurriedly waved his hand, his face turning red. He thought it was an illusion, so it shouldn't be a problem. The class leader looked at him strangely. You haven't recovered yet, but you still came here rashly. Didn't I tell you to rest at home for a few days? The people who came with you got separated from you, right? Nanhang smiled bitterly and didn't know how to answer. They didn't get separated. They were clearly... Oh, now they're gone, so they might be separated. There's no other way. I'll go back with you. The class leader shook his head and turned to everyone. I'll go back with Nanhang to find the search and rescue team. You guys wait for us here. In the dense forest, Yin Nuoxing looked up at the gradually rising sun in the sky. The forest and sky that were lingering with clouds and fog gradually became brighter. The slightly cold weather made his palms cold, and he couldn't help but breathe into his palms. Then he looked down at the front. He stretched out his hand and pressed on the space in front of him. There was something that looked like an energy rune in front of his palm, preventing his palm from continuing to move forward. The two collided with each other and burst out a weak energy ripple, spreading in all directions. Did you do it? Can you do it? The little girl stepped forward and poked the invisible space barrier in front of them. Be careful. Don't throw this space into the void. I'm trying my best. Hey, why is there a spatial barrier in this godforsaken forest? Hui smiled bitterly. This layer of space barrier blocked the three of them. Zhou Zibai was blocked by them and did not rush in. Only Nanhang, that little guy, rushed into the barrier by himself. He did not know what would happen to him if he ran in there alone. Zhou Zibai stepped forward and touched the space. Seeing that her palm seemed to be unaffected, she couldn't help but say, Did those people who went missing in Soaring Dragon Mountain all go missing here? You don't say. It's possible. Hui raised his head and looked at the huge space barrier. But what made such a big barrier here? And it's not weak at all. It's even connected to the surrounding space. Mr. Hui, can't you break it so easily? Zhou Zibai scratched her head. Of course not. Hui turned his head and rolled his eyes. For us, this is a low-level space barrier, but because it's too low-level, and because it's attached to this space, our strength is too strong. We can kill it with a slap, but if we don't control our strength well, we'll kill everything within 7 or 8 kilometers in front of us. Didn't that little guy run in? I can't just watch him go in and kill him with a slap. We can't break it by force, and we can't cause chain damage to the space inside and outside. We can only use a little bit of strength to test it carefully. In short, they couldn't control what would happen inside if they dismantled it. They couldn't break in, so they could only try to pry the door open. Zhou Zhibai smiled bitterly. Well, she was used to it. Her previous experience was, when encountering a seal or other people's space, the more powerful it was, the easier it was to break it. She didn't expect to encounter someone who was so powerful that they could only open it carefully. Hey, that's not right. Hui suddenly stopped and turned to Maple. Maple, let me borrow the Netherworld Ruins sword. Yin Nuashing was also taken aback. He suddenly realized and said, Ah, yes, you can use the Nethervoid sword. 5 seconds later, the purple-black sword gently poked the space in front of him, and the fragile space barrier was cut open. Yin Nuashing swung his hand and put away the sword, taking the lead to walk in. Hui glanced at it and couldn't help but sigh bitterly. What was I doing there for so long? Maple, don't be in a daze all the time. I'm looking inside. There seems to be an interesting life form inside. Yin Nuashing interrupted him directly, startling everyone. An interesting life form? A long blue worm. Long worm. Hui thought for half a second, and then said, I didn't expect there to be such a life form here. But Maple, I feel like you're scolding people. Oh, scolding dragons. Yin Nuashing stroked her long hair that fell in front of her and shook her head. After all, there are two kinds of things. I like to say it clearly and talk about it later. Hui and the little girl thought for a moment and said, Oh, after all, dragons, right? One is a big lizard with wings, and the other is a big snake without wings. But the big snake might be a snake and the long worm. Okay, it still sounded like he was scolding dragons. What about the long worm with wings? Isn't that still a long worm? Yin Nuashing rolled her eyes and strode into the space barrier in front of them. As they walked in, the crack that was created by the Netherworld ruins soar behind them slowly closed. The sky gradually became gloomy, and the soul power that spread out could easily find the breath of life. They removed the breath that belonged to this primitive forest in the range and accurately found the breath of people. However, it was a strange breath that they had never seen before, and there was a slightly strange breath in it, which made their expressions change slightly. They looked at each other and rushed out without communicating. When Yin Nuashing rushed out, she pulled Zhou Zhibai with her. This time, they didn't fly up, and the little girl didn't scream, which was rare. She covered her mouth with a pale face and could almost withstand the speed that was beyond the speed of sound by who knows how many times. When the speed of flying through the forest suddenly turned into an empty field in front of them, they slowed down a little because they didn't understand the situation. The forest in front of them suddenly disappeared, and the green field was neatly replaced by a grayish-yellow wilderness that was half a meter lower. The cracked earth looked like it had been dry for countless years, and it didn't have the beautiful scenery of the Longquan area at all. It was more like another space. There's no feeling of switching spaces. A ray of light flashed in her eyes, and Yin Nuashing shook her head at Hui, who was looking at her. From the moment we stepped into the space barrier until now, we didn't feel like we were teleported. Judging by the scene in front of us, it should be that this space barrier has roughly pieced together another space and the space of the present world. The remaining wilderness should be a transitional scene, and in front of us is another pieced together space, and Yin Nuashing and the others stopped in the wilderness. The wind blew, and dust filled the sky. The gloomy breath rose from the crack in the earth like maggots. It felt like they had walked into a volcanic area, and the mountains in front of them were about to erupt. The surrounding wilderness was preheated, and thick smoke was constantly gushing out from the ground. Just by landing here, they could feel the overflowing heat wave. The gloomy breath was mixed with negative emotions, and the negative energy was very strong. According to the level, it was dozens of times higher than the fragment. Did I accidentally stumble upon the core of this matter? Hui smiled bitterly and shook his head. When he came to the soaring dragon mountain and encountered the fragment, he already felt that something was wrong. Looking at it now, the so-called divine artifact might have broken a fragment for some reason after walking around the soaring dragon mountain. Then, it might have left something here, which was why it could create such a ghost-like effect. The earth of the wilderness could feel that the breath of life was disappearing. Under the care of the gloomy breath. This land only had the rejection and malice of life. If an ordinary person walked here, they would probably be wrapped by the gloomy breath in less than 2 minutes, turning into white bones and being buried here. Unlike the gloomy breath that floated in the big and small cities, the gloomy breath that seemed to shrink in a corner and wait for the day they grew stronger, and occasionally dared to make small movements carefully. Passers-by were stimulated by negative emotions and negative energy, causing them to become irritable and restless. The gloomy breath here was simply to the extent of wantonly showing off in their own territory. It was full of confidence and revealed infinite malice. Raising her hand to create a barrier of order for Zhou Zibai, Yin Nuoxing took 2 steps forward. A huge black shadow appeared on the ground in front of them. It was shrouded in a dense, gloomy breath, and it was about 1 or 2 meters tall on the ground. Looking at its appearance, it seemed to be a fierce beast. Killed in 1 hit, Yin Nuoxing raised her hand and pointed at the place where the beast's head was. There was a palm print there. If the beast was hit in the head, it should be dead instantly. It's so big, Zhou Zibai whispered. It seems to be just an ordinary wolf. But why did it become bigger? I don't remember such a big wolf. It was contaminated by this breath. It probably mutated. Hui pointed at the ground, and then pointed at the gloomy breath on the giant wolf. Don't touch it. The barrier that Maple gave you is still safe. If you touch it, you may become like it. Zhou Zibai exclaimed and quickly shrank behind Yin Nuoxing. She carefully looked around and fixed her eyes in front of her. Instantly, she froze. In front of them was a wasteland. Hundreds of similarly huge black shadows fell on the ground. It seemed that their lives were taken away by something. Hui heard her exclamation and raised his head. He looked into the distance and could not help but say, "Oh, this wasteland is full of these things. There are so many of them. We have bumped into a base camp." Chapter 1783. On the barren land, a cold, gloomy wind blew along with the dancing yellow sand to every corner of the wasteland. As the wind blew past one's ears, one could hear the rustling of the sand mixed with the whispers that reverberated in one's ears. There was an unsettling aura circulating in the air. The entire wasteland was like a domain of death. Once one entered, there was basically no chance of leaving in one piece. This was the first time that Zhou Zibai had personally come into contact with this dark aura. Even though there was only a layer of barrier between them, she could still feel its unsettling aura. In the past few days, she had only seen it with her eyes. She could only vaguely see it and not distinguish it clearly. The dark aura that she saw in the underground space was said to have condensed enough, so she could see it more clearly and capture its existence with the naked eye. Then here, the pervasive dark aura floated all over the wilderness. She could clearly see this scene and feel its existence. She could clearly feel the disgusting and abhorrent negative aura, and she almost vomited out the disgusting and abhorrent negative aura. This was definitely not something normal people could touch. She thought so. Killed with 1 blow, that is to say, someone has been here. Zhou Zibai thought of what they said and looked at the traces of the mountain of corpses and sea of blood in the wasteland. Will those people be there? Probably so. However, it's hard to say how long they can last after running out of this place. Huey's wandering eyes were filled with a little bit of gold. He scanned the wasteland and waved his hand after a while. Found them. Hey, they look like they're still alive. You seem to have some strange expectations? No. Hui shrugged and grinned. He swung his arm and strode towards the end of the wasteland. Yin Nuoxing clapped her hands and suddenly turned her eyes to the left. She frowned slightly and said to herself, "It seems that the opening of this space is random." Hui, who walked 2 steps faster, turned his head and grinned. What did you say?" "Nothing." In the wasteland, a pack of wolves the size of a small truck was confronting a small group of humans. The wolves were surrounded by a dark aura that made people feel uneasy. It was the thing that the humans were most afraid of. The distance between the 2 sides was less than 10 meters. They were ready to fight at any moment, waiting for the slightest sound to be heard. The eyes of the dozens of ferocious beasts had been turned blood-red by the dark aura, flashing with the light of slaughter and chaos. However, there seemed to be a trace of caution remaining. They did not rush to fight with the 7 little ones in front of them. They only used small movements to adjust their positions, moving closer and closer to ensure that when the time came, they could win with one strike. At the same time, they were vigilant of the 2 little ones who were standing at the forefront with sharp weapons in their hands. Along the way, they had seen with their own eyes that the 2 little ones had killed countless hunters. Standing at the forefront was a young man and a young woman. They were wearing the same white and purple robes. They were dirty, and many damaged parts exposed the skin of their hands, legs, and waist. However, they did not expect this thin layer of cloth to have much defensive power. They just grabbed the long sword in their hands and let it show more than a dozen marks under the influence of the dark aura. The energy light vaguely released had an amazing deterrent force. When the dozens of wolves that had turned into monsters were looking at them, the 2 of them constantly adjusted their sword-holding movements. They moved their feet slightly to maintain a state where they could dodge attacks and counterattack at any time. Although they had done well in their counterattack state, only they knew how much strength they had left. After chasing for a long time, they still had to resist the erosion of the dark aura. They were not sure whether they would fall to the ground in the next moment. When they were ready to fight, the other 5 people behind them seemed to be about the same age as them. They were wearing casual clothes and carrying backpacks. They were probably traveling to Soaring Dragon Mountain. When the 2 of them were tired of fighting, they suddenly appeared behind them. After chasing them for a long time, they were already exhausted and numb. And they were just as numb as the 2 of them. At this moment, they almost could not even wave their swords. If they did not know that if they threw away their swords, the wolves on the opposite side would swarm over and eat them. We can't escape. We can't hide. Are we really going to die in this damn place? Retracting his gaze from the 5 ordinary people, the young man's complexion was pale. They had persisted for 2 months. They had run such a long way. Seeing that this wasteland seemed to have come to an end, they were about to run out of oil. The young man took a deep breath. Finally, he changed the posture of his long sword and pointed it at the ground. With a pale face, he bitterly sighed. If I had known this would happen, I would have confessed to Senior's sister before leaving. Then I wouldn't have. Senior brother, you should concentrate. The woman fiercely glared at him. Her voice was still calm. We still have the power to fight one last battle. At least, we can send these 5 ordinary people out. The young man calmly nodded. Okay, use your last strength. Look at the one with white fur on the left. You go there, and I'll go to the right. The woman took a deep breath. What's next? That's it. The young man calmly shrugged. Taking a few of them with me before I die would be more dignified. The woman, while the 2 of them were in a daze, the wolf pack suddenly let out a low growl. Exerting force from their feet, they instantly covered a distance of 5 to 6 meters and pounced at the 2 of them like a huge rock. The 2 of them immediately focused. The long sword in their hands drew a phantom. The power of the Tao marks gathered and was about to explode. As a result, the dozens of ferocious beasts suddenly stopped 5 meters in front of them. They only took 1 step and then no more steps. It was as if their necks were being strangled. Their bodies stiffened, and then they let out whimpers. Their bodies trembled as they slowly crawled on the ground. The dark aura on their bodies seemed to have been swept into a storm and was being torn apart. It was as if a piece of it was being removed from their bodies. Ah! The young man was stunned. He was about to swing his sword. At this moment, he forcefully pulled back his hand, and his hand trembled. Why did they suddenly become obedient? The woman looked around in confusion. Suddenly, she reacted and pointed to the front. Senior brother, look behind the wolf pack. A few figures appeared dozens of meters behind the wolf pack. Other than the woman who was also in the 4th realm of the human realm like them, the other 3 were completely ordinary people. They walked over in the wasteland as if they were strolling. They covered dozens of meters with one step and appeared in front of the two of them in just 2 breaths. The man walking on the left suddenly laughed. "Ah, I'm not late, right?" "You are?" The two of them looked at him in confusion. They did not remember such a strong person. Yin Nuoxing turned around and stared at the group of beasts with his colorful eyes. As the power of order continued to spread, the dark aura on their bodies also dissipated. The abnormal energy and life force in their bodies were also rapidly depleted. Their bodies that were the size of a small hill quickly shriveled up like a balloon that was deflating. After a short while, they returned to their original size. He slowly squatted down and looked at them. He closed his eyes. "Go to sleep. It will be over when you wake up." The fierce beasts were completely silent now. The red light in their scarlet eyes dissipated, revealing a pair of lively big eyes. As if they understood Yin Nuoxing's words, they looked at him with their eyes one last time. Then, they slowly closed their eyes and silently fell asleep. The last wisp of energy left their completely distorted and mutated bodies. They were like stone statues that had been weathered for countless years. They disintegrated at once and turned into gray smoke that dissipated in the air. They hovered in the wasteland before them and gradually disappeared. The little girl waved her little hand. The grayish-blue energy left the place where the fierce beast stood and landed in her palm. She looked at it for a while and looked at Yin Nuoxing thoughtfully. They have been dead for almost 4 years. The negative energy that seems to be related to the chaotic void has turned them into puppets, and they have been wandering around this place. It is very close to the time that the dark aura settled down. It is also the longest time that we have found it. Yin Nuoxing nodded. From the looks of it, Soaring Dragon Mountain was very likely to be the place where this dark aura first appeared. Currently, there was no way to see the entire planet clearly in one breath, so it could only be refreshed bit by bit. Yin Nuoxing stood up and turned around. There was a gust of wind in front of him. Then, a young man in a white robe appeared in his sight with a rose in his mouth. His face was shining with a delicate and golden light. He stared at him with a very eager gaze. "Beauty, do you have time to have a cup of tea later?" Yin Nuoxing. He felt that the frequency of this happening seemed to have increased after he came here. The woman in the same clothes quickly walked over. She knocked her senior brother's head with her fist and dragged him to the side. Then, she walked to Yin Nuoxing and cupped her hands. "Thank you for saving me." Yin Nuoxing looked at them and then looked at the 5 ordinary people who were lying on the ground and seemed to have completely relaxed after their arrival. He said, "You were lost 2 months ago. I am Bingyu, a disciple of Ice Island. This is my senior brother, Ling Dong." The woman nodded slightly and looked back at the 5 ordinary people. She sighed in relief. "We heard that there was something strange in the Soaring Dragon Mountain, so we came to investigate. We accidentally fell into this abnormal space. You can guess what happened later, but you were able to fight and run for 2 months." We looked around and nodded to the 2 people. "Do you know how to get out?" "This." Bingyu looked troubled as she shook her head. "I'm ashamed to say this, but it's already the limit for the 2 of us to make it this far. Moreover, we still have to protect the ordinary people who appeared on the way here. If you guys had come a little later, we might have died here. Well, we have found a group of people, but we still have to find another group." Hui shrugged and walked to the 5 ordinary people who had lost their minds. He checked them and said, "Nothing serious. They have been in a state of mental tension for a long time. They're a little mentally exhausted and overworked. I guess the aura here is focused on dealing with you 2 and has no time to deal with these 5 small fries. Their vitality is not exhausted. They just need to go out and rest for a while. By the way, how did these 5 ordinary people survive?" At this moment, Ling Dong jumped up from the ground and waved the ring on his hand. "It's nothing. It's just that we've used up the dry rations that we've been storing for half a year. My junior sister and I can last longer without eating or drinking, but ordinary people can't." The few of them had been jumping around in front of the reincarnation road for a month or 2. Now that they were relaxed, they felt a little loose. They lay on the ground and didn't want to move. We thought for a moment and could only drag them into the domain. Then he looked at Ice Fish and Ling Dong. Can you still walk? I should let you rest for a while after escaping from death, but there are still important things to deal with. We haven't found anyone here. We can still hold on for a while. Ling Dong nodded and put away his long sword. The people are more important. Let's go. But do you know where they are? It's not that we want to pour cold water on you, but we have been running here for 2 months. This place is quite big. Can we find them in a safe time? It's not a big problem. We gave a thumbs up and turned to look at Feng. Feng, have you found that little guy? Yin Nuoxing turned to look at the wilderness and raised his finger to the right. It's 400 miles away. That long worm is also there. It's still safe at the moment. He paused and looked at the wilderness in front of him. I'll deal with this place first. Deal with it. Ling Dong and Bing Yu were startled, but Hui and Zhou Ji suddenly understood and quickly retreated a distance. Yin Nuoxing looked at the wilderness behind him, and a colorful light appeared on his body. Then it suddenly disappeared. He raised his hand and snapped his fingers, returned to nothingness. A thick energy light visible to the naked eye soared into the sky and exploded into circles of energy rings in the air. Then the whole wilderness suddenly shook. Under the horrified gaze of Ling Dong and Bing Yu, an indescribable colorful light suddenly soared into the sky from the wilderness in front of them. The monstrous energy attached to the earth and spread out without any scruples. The entire earth was covered in the colorful firelight. Even the surface of the earth was shattered by the impact of the energy. Layer by layer, the debris fell into the depths of the earth and solidified into dark crystals. Oh! Ling Dong threw away the rose on the spot. Thinking back to how he had rushed up and acted like a love-struck fool, he looked at his junior sister with a gloomy face. Ice Fish, I won't be beaten to death, right? Bing Yu looked at the scene in front of her, where the firelight soared into the sky and melted the earth. She thought for a while and put her hands together. I'll ask Master for a soul lamp for you. Every year at this time, I'll ask everyone to worship you. Don't treat me as if I died in battle so quickly. But senior brother, you even dared to flirt with senior sister. Why did you retreat here? Bing Yu tilted her head and looked at him. Ling Dong glanced at the fire that soared into the sky and turned into hell. His cheeks twitched. Senior sister can't kill me no matter how hard she hits me. Although she's prettier than senior sister, I can't afford to offend her. Small fights are called love. Ling Dong took a deep breath. I'll turn into ashes. The energy flames that soared into the sky continued to burn the wasteland for 2 minutes before gradually subsiding. Countless small flames hung on the ground and slowly burned the remaining dark aura. The entire wasteland sank a few meters due to the cleansing of the colorful energy, and a big hole appeared. After the few of them finished cleaning up and were about to go back, the ground suddenly trembled and almost made Ling Dong and Hui fall to the ground. They quickly used the little spiritual energy left to stabilize their bodies so that they didn't fall to the ground. However, the trembling of the ground seemed to be getting more and more intense. Huey's face was full of sweat. Feng, did you destroy this space? No, I just purified the aura. Yin Nuoxing shook her head calmly. She looked into the distance and murmured doubtfully, Earthquake. The ground twisted and churned like softened noodles. The ground that had been burned solidified into a whole piece, like an obsidian. It was so hard that it was difficult for the earth to break it. On the contrary, huge cracks suddenly appeared on the edge of the black, crystallized ground. The cracks continued to spread in all directions. The increasingly violent tremors almost spread throughout the entire space barrier. The unusual scale of the tremors made Zhou Zibai and the others quickly support Yin Nuoxing and the others next to them, lest they stumble and fall into the cracks. Those cracks spread from their feet. The violent tremors made Nan Hang and the others, who were far away in the jungle at the other end of the space, also feel frightened. Almost as soon as the first tremor rolled over, they collectively fell to the ground. In the chaos, they hurriedly hugged the trees next to them to prevent themselves from rolling to other places. I've never heard of an earthquake in Soaring Dragon Mountain. Nanhang pressed the class monitor to the ground and barely protected the two of them with his aura. The sharp tearing sound from the ground made his teeth ache. It's better to say that this place has an earthquake. It's simply not seen once in decades. In the valley, the coiled blue worm suddenly rolled up its eyelids. A pair of vertical slits in its glittering golden eyes shrunk slightly. A mighty dragon's might slowly emanated from its body. Like a hurricane, it rushed to the surrounding land from the valley. The movement that almost seemed like the earth was about to flip over abruptly calmed down, but only a part of it was stopped. A low growl came from the dragon's throat as its golden eyes stared at the depths of the ground. It was not an earthquake. It was just them suddenly being startled and turning over. But it had never seen them make such a huge movement. It was almost affecting the space outside through the barrier. Those children were still wandering here. Speaking of which, when did the barrier become so fragile that it couldn't even stop a few children? Could it be that it gradually lost its power when fighting against them? So it couldn't even stop the cultivators and ordinary people who were slightly lower in realm? Dragons and humans. It was not easy to talk. It was worried that if it suddenly appeared in front of the group of children, they would be scared and run away in panic. So it didn't want to go there. The energy that erupted above their heads really made it a little anxious. It didn't know who had come here to affect them, and almost 1/3 of their strength was wiped out in an instant. Well, it's been a long time since I last moved. It exhaled a long breath. Its huge body suddenly shrunk in a burst of blue light and turned into a young girl with a slender body. Her cheeks were covered with blue scales, and she wore a blue dress. Her long hair was as beautiful as the blue sea. There were several fist-sized water balls hovering around her, forming an intermittent circle behind her. It seemed to be telling people that her ability was related to water. Just as she was about to head towards the wasteland, she suddenly sensed a few auras approaching at a speed that exceeded her expectations. They even split into two groups on the way. One group led another group to look for the children, while the other two were heading straight towards her. They came directly? That saves me the trouble of making a trip. She stretched her body and sat by the water to tidy up her long hair. She reached out and fiddled with the water ring. As she waited, she suddenly felt that something was wrong. The two fellows with strange auras suddenly stopped in their tracks. Then they dived into the ground. Are they crazy? That's the place they occupy. If they rush over, it will cause the energy that has been buried deep in the ground to explode. The girl was so shocked that she jumped up. She sensed that they were really heading straight down into the ground. She was so shocked that she was stunned. After thinking for a while, she hurriedly dove into the deep pool, turning into dense bubbles and disappearing into the water. There was an unknown energy hidden deep in the ground. It had an aura that she could not detect in detail. It was an even stronger, even more indescribable energy. Perhaps it was not as simple as just being strong. Its existence made her inadvertently associate it with those legendary existences that the humans spoke of. That thing with a butt full of black smoke suddenly fell from the sky one day a few years ago, smashing into the lake she was hiding in, penetrating all the way to the ground and settling down. Even though she had exhausted all her strength, she could only barely trap it in this spatial barrier, restraining the impact of that energy to the outside world, trapping it here. However, she could only watch as it grew stronger by the day, as if it would never run out of energy at all. In the deep pool of the underground car's cave, she hurriedly jumped out of the pool and hurriedly went deeper. She did not even have time to deal with the dark aura that permeated the air. She felt that the two auras were right in front of her and hurriedly sped up. Hey, you don't know what? Burn. Burn it all clean. Foam, burn it slowly. Don't collapse this cave. I'm slow, I'm really slow. Stop rushing me. If you have the time to rush me, why don't you hurry up and strengthen the strength of this space? How long will it take to burn it bit by bit? Look at this foul air. This disgusting thing is as dense as the chaotic void. Just looking at it makes me. Hee hee, I want to burn it. I'm afraid you want to sink these hundreds of mountains into the ground together, right? The two people in white clothes and colorful luster were easily purifying the dark aura in the underground space. They even had the time to bicker. However, the dark aura that had settled down here for several years retreated in panic, as if it had encountered heaven and earth. She was stunned to see this. The two people who heard the sound also turned their heads. We saw the young girl standing at the entrance of the cave in a daze. He suddenly waved his hand. "Oh, it's a little dragon girl. You came just in time. Come and help." The girl. "Yeah, you're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.